Corporation and the meeting of the City Council, Petaluma Community Development Successor Agency for Monday, April 4th. Can we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Barrett.
Here.
Council members Barnacle.
Here.
Fisher.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
King.
Here.
McDonald.
Here.
Kosike.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you very much. So we are getting ready to go into closed session, and I will ask the city attorney to read that issue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be happy to read the agenda description. The council will confer with labor negotiators under Government Code Section 54957.6. The agency designated representatives are Peggy Flynn, City Manager, Brian Cochran, Assistant City Manager, and Charlotte Freckman, Director of Human Resources, as well as Charles Sakai, who's a labor negotiator with Sloan Sakai. The Petaluma Public Safety Mid-Management Association, Unit 10, is the subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will ask the interim city clerk if she has received any public comment on this item.
Madam Mayor, no public comment was received on this item.
And I will ask our moderator to see if there's anybody in the public audience who would like to speak on this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the public wishing to speak on this closed session item only, please raise your hand in Zoom and you'll be called on in turn. You'll have 3 minutes in which to give your comments. I am looking at the attendees and I see no hands raised, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We will close public comment on this item, and we will go to closed session, and we will come back to this meeting of closed session or at 6:30, whichever is later. So thank you very much. Good evening.
Hi, good afternoon, Patrick. This is the interpreter.
Hello.
Hi, I just wanted to make sure that both Christina and I are on board to be designated as interpreters.
You are. We're not going to start the interpretation until 6:30 though. So
Okay, great.
We can hear you loud and clear. So thank you for doing that. And you can take a break until 6:30.
6:30. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, all council members have returned to this meeting. It is almost 6:30, less than a minute to go.
Thank you. So just let us know when we are live. Oh, I guess we are live.
We are live.
Okay, but when it's 6:30, then I will begin the meeting. Thank you.
And there was a slight change to the interpreters, Madam Mayor. It will be Cristina Guerrero Harmon and Monica Aparicio as our interpreters tonight.
Cristina Guerrero
Harmon.
Yep. Okay, thank you. So Maria is not here.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And we are at 6:30 now, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you for that. Good evening and welcome to the City of Petaluma regular meeting of the Petaluma Public Financing Authority, the Petaluma Public Financing Corporation, and meeting of the City Council, Petaluma Community Development Successor Agency for Monday, April 4th. And I would like to introduce Cristina Guerrero Harmon and Monica Aparicio to provide information for those who want to listen in Spanish.
Good afternoon. My name is Monica Aparicio, and I'm here with my colleague, Cristina Guerrero Harmon, and we will be the interpreters for this evening's meeting. I will now provide instructions for those who wish to join us for the simultaneous language interpretation. At the bottom of the screen, you will see 3 dots, and then you will select language interpretation and go to Spanish. Buenas noches, me llamo Mónica Aparicio, estoy aquí con mi colega Cristina Guerrero Harmon y vamos a ser las intérpretes de esta noche para esta sesión. Por favor, para las personas que deseen escuchar esta audiencia en español, en la parte de abajo de su pantalla van a ver el icono de un mundo o 3 puntitos y la palabra more o más. Presione ahí y de ahí elige interpretación de idiomas y español. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And can we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Barrett,
Here.
council members Barnacle,
Here.
Fisher,
Here.
Healy,
Here.
King,
Here.
McDonald,
Here.
Pusake.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you very much. And now we will have the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pardon for the interruption, Madam Mayor. I don't believe that we have been assigned as interpreters. I know the interpretation is on, but we individually need to be assigned as interpreters.
All right, I will ask our moderator, Patrick Carter or Aaron Zavala to take care of that while we are doing the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we will now have a moment of silence in memory of former Mayor Clark Thompson. Thank you. And has the connection been made yet for the translation?
I believe so, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much for taking care of that. And right now we will go to the report out of closed session to our city attorney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's no action to report tonight.
Okay, thank you. And now we will do our proclamations. Our first proclamation tonight is for Arbor Day, which is April 9th. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas trees reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas the trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community, and wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. And whereas the city of Petaluma partners with community organizations such as Relief Petaluma to plant more trees, educate our community on the importance of trees, and take stewardship of establishing newly planted trees. And whereas the city of Petaluma has been recognized as a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation and desires to continue its tree planting practices. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Teresa Barrett, Mayor of Petaluma, along with the members of the Petaluma City Council, do hereby proclaim April 9th, 2022 as Arbor Day in the city of Petaluma, and urge all residents to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands and to plant trees to promote the well-being of this and further future generations. And I believe we're going to hear from Cindy Chong from our Parks Department.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very honored to receive this proclamation today, and we're really excited to share with our community, with the council, that not only is this Arbor Day for Petaluma, but we are hosting a fairly large event with Relief Petaluma, along with the Tree Advisory Committee this Saturday. In Wiseman Park, we will be planting 152 trees. The bulk of those, about 150, I believe, are native species. So we're really excited. There's going to be about 200 volunteers. And if you have not signed up already, we welcome you to do so, and we'd love for you to be there. But we're really going to change the landscape of that park by providing some shade spaces that are much needed. Most of us have been through Wiseman Park quite a bit, and you'll know all along the pathway there's not a lot of shade, and it's used quite often every day by all groups of people, with their kids, with their dogs, and we also have ball fields and soccer fields. So it's a very much loved and used park. So we're very excited to be able to plant this 152 trees as the start of our push to grow our urban canopy. So thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. We very much appreciate the proclamation.
Thank you. And if someone did want to sign up for Saturday's event, where could they do that?
If they go to the Relief webpage, they can sign up there. There's a link, and they're still taking a few volunteers, but I know space is getting limited. And if you do come, we are encouraging people to please ride your bike, walk, at the very least carpool, because the parking is limited, and we want you to not use your vehicles if you don't have to.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And with that, we're going on to our second proclamation of this evening, and that is declaring April 2022 as Fair Housing Month. Whereas the principle of fair housing is not only state and national law and policy, but a fundamental human concept and entitlement for all citizens. And whereas discrimination based on race, national origin, gender, disability, familial status, exclusion of minor children, religion, marital status, and sexual orientation is illegal in California. And whereas as a community, we welcome all good neighbors, recognizing the contributions and richness tendered by a wide variety of young and old, male and female, people of all colors and ethnic backgrounds, religious traditions, etc. And whereas interested parties from both the private and public sector will participate in a city, state, and national effort to promote fair housing. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Teresa Barrett, Mayor of Petaluma, along with the members of the City Council, do hereby declare the month of April 2022 as Fair Housing Month in the city of Petaluma, and urge all residents of our community to personally adopt the spirit of equal housing opportunities and adhere to the letter and character of the fair housing laws. And here to receive this proclamation is Elise Hempel, who needs no introduction.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And most of you know how passionate I am about fair housing. Fair housing has been a program that PPSC has partnered with the city since the inception of Petaluma People Services Center. And our model is a little bit different than most models that fair housing operates throughout the state of California and even in the United States. We focus and and engage our community with a prevention and intervention kind of model. So our goal is to provide training to landlords, whether they are first-time landlords or new property managers. Our goal is to make sure that we're providing the training that's necessary so that they become and are good landlords, and they know the rules that they need to follow to make sure that everybody in our community has a safe place to call home. I am not going to lie, the last 2 years have been the wild, wild west when it comes to fair housing. We have received a record number of calls. I just turned in the quarterly report for the third quarter, and I was a little aghast at how many calls we had fielded. While we continue to help landlords and tenants navigate this choppy water, especially with the rental assistance and the emergency rental assistance programs. And so the team here has done an amazing job, and we continue to do that, all while continuing to provide additional training and working with our low-income housing property managers so they also understand the rules. So thank you. And like the proclamation said, fair housing should be something that's always front of mind for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for all the work you and Petaluma People Services does for our community. So with that, we are moving on to agenda changes and deletions to the current agenda, and I do not believe there are any for this agenda. So we will move on to a public hearing, and this is the public hearing regarding election districts and district election sequencing for Petaluma district-based elections and adoption, second reading, of ordinance number 2803 NCS, a district elections ordinance providing for election of the mayor at large and the election of the remaining members of the city council by 6 election districts, approving an election district map, establishing district boundaries, establishing the election order of each district, and adding a new Title V, City Council elections, to the Petaluma Municipal Code to codify the city's city council election requirements. And I will now turn it over to our city attorney, Eric Danley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That was, I guess I have to take responsibility for that not very catchy but descriptive title you just read. It covers a lot of what this is about. This is the final scheduled public hearing of the city council on what's been kind of an action-packed and fairly lengthy transition process to district elections. In introducing this item, I'd like to really note some appreciation for the council and its leadership and what's been, I think, an exemplary process, focusing as it is supposed to on the purposes of the California Voting Rights Act and not on questions such as incumbency or how it may impact the council members. And I really feel the council has been, exemplary in how they've led that process. It's been a tremendous amount of teamwork to get to this point on the part of staff, the amazing outreach that Ingrid Alverde has overseen, the absolutely essential assistance we've had from outside legal counsel and demographer experts to get us to this point. Also, there's been, the outpouring of public participation that we've come to expect on the part of Petaluma community members. Our outside team was kind of stunned by the number of fully qualified, fully compliant maps we received from members of the public. And as the council knows, it was one of those maps that the council chose to adopt. So thanks to all those folks for getting to this point. We are on schedule with tonight's hearing so that the council is in a position to adopt and give the second reading to the city's district elections ordinance in time to stay within the safe harbor provisions of the law, which caps the city's exposure to attorney's fees. I'd like to touch on, just very briefly, a few of the key features of the district elections process and ordinance that the council solidified at the last meeting in introducing the ordinance. But if there are further questions that the council or members of the public have, we'll be glad to address them, and the rest of the team is here to help with that too. So the ordinance selects and incorporates the final map that the council chose. And just as a reminder, that was the amended version of the IC2 map that fixed that tail that existed related to the census tracts underlying Highway 101. The sequence of the elections in the districts is set by the ordinance. And just to cover briefly how that happened, we basically had some blanks to fill in the ordinance that the council designated what had been a letter designations for the districts and changed those to numbers, which is traditional and common for election districts, and also established the sequence. So District A became District 1, District B became District 2, District C became District 4, District D became District 3, District E became District 5, and District F became District 6. And those numbers set forth the sequence such that Districts 1, 2, and 3 will be electing their representatives in 2022 and every 4 years thereafter. At the same time that the at-large mayor seat is elected, and Districts 4, 5, and 6 will be electing their representatives in 2024 and every 4 years thereafter. And those are the presidential year elections. The other ones being the mid-tier elections. The other thing that the council did was to direct that the eligibility requirements for council members would include a 30-day residency requirement, so that the ordinance as introduced and as before the council tonight for second reading incorporates that for the maximum constitutional time, which is 30 days. And the language we used says that eligible city council candidates must have resided in the case of district candidates in the district from which they're seeking election for at least 30 days immediately preceding the time they file their nominating papers or their declarations of candidacy. And the same is true concerning the mayoral seat, except for that applies to residency in the city, at large, as opposed to in a district. In addition, as the council and the public will recall, the district election ordinance preserves the separately elected mayoral seat as designated by the city charter. And there's provisions in the ordinance that refer to state law procedures for subsequent adjustments to the district boundaries following subsequent censuses and also annexations. So that concludes my remarks. Madam Mayor and Council, I'll be happy to address any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from anybody on the council or any comments? I'm not seeing any hands go up. So I will ask our interim city clerk if she has received any correspondence on this item.
Madam Mayor, no public comments have been received.
Thank you. And I will ask our moderator to open the public hearing and see if there's anybody in attendance. And we have 28 people in attendance at this time to see if anybody wants to speak to this item.
I will do so, Madam Mayor. Okay, I saw a council member had his hand up, but it's down now. Members of the public wishing to speak on this public hearing item, please raise your hand in Zoom and you'll be called on in turn. You'll have 3 minutes in which to give your comments, at the end of which you will be muted, or if your comments conclude before that timer, you'll be muted then. Speakers are encouraged to be respectful. Threats of violence and obscenity are grounds removal from the meeting, and speakers must keep to the current topic under discussion by the City Council. Off-topic speakers will be muted. And I'm looking, I see one hand raised, so I will share my screen and allow S. Kirks to speak.
I'm interested in knowing the identity of the author or authors of IC2 or Idea Combination 2 map, which is the baseline map that is being used or has been used with some consultant modifications for Petaluma's redistricting. I would like to see that information be public and that this process be transparent. I had requested to know the identity of the author or authors from the city and was advised that that information could not be provided. If it's not possible to provide that information, I'd like to know why that is And I really think it would be beneficial for the community at large to know who the resident or what is or residents are who provided the IC2 map that the city council selected for your baseline. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. And that is the only hand, so I'll turn it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll close the public hearing, public comment part of the public hearing. And I will bring it back to the council members, Councilmember Barnacle, followed by Councilmember King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to express gratitude for everybody who worked on this. It's not surprising, it may have surprised our consultants, but it's not surprising to me that we had so much participation because there was, we were everywhere in the community. We were at street fairs and doing everything. And I really think that while we were sort of forced into this and probably went faster than we wanted to, the Petaluma City staff did an excellent job of engaging the community and educating them about what was going on. So thank you. And with that, I'll move the item.
Thank you. Councilmember King.
Thank you. And I agree with comments of Councilmember Barnacle as well. And I'll second the passing of this ordinance.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember McDonald.
Well, I guess there's no third, but I just wanted to echo those notes of appreciation and gratitude to staff for getting us through this particularly tough road. The public should know that statewide, every agency and city and school district is all in this path to make the change that it has to districts, and this is the least contentious in the community, the least contentious at the council level, and there's a lot of good in Petaluma that brings about things constructively as needed. And so I'm very, very happy we got without any civil wars breaking out and et cetera that happen in so many communities.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Healy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would agree that this process went more smoothly than a lot of us expected, and due to the work of the consultants, staff, and the community. Madam City Clerk, I just want to tell you these following comments are for the record, which under our council rules means they should be reported verbatim in the minutes. I just want to say that I will be voting no on this. I support the adopted maps. I think those are as good as we could have gotten, but I don't support the sequencing decision. By placing the two districts with the highest proportion of minority voters in the city in the non-presidential general election cycle, this action will be diluting the impact of those voters for decades to come. So I will respectfully vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for that clarification. And before we take our vote, I will go to the city attorney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If it please the mayor and the council, I can respond to Ms. Kirk's question.
I was just going to ask that, so thank you very much.
And unless any, I just checked with the manager. I think this is true, and if any of the staff know otherwise, they can contradict me. But we don't know the identity of the author of the IC2 map. It's not a requirement that we know that. We didn't seek to know that. We just received that map along with the others, and made it available to the council along with the analysis of its contents. So that's our answer with respect to that, is at least to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you very much. I see
Thank you.
Councilmember Healy has his hand up again.
Thank you. From the email chatter I've seen, I thought it was G. Keller, no relation to David Keller. Am I missing something there?
I'm seeing a negative shake of the head from Councilmember Barnacle. But I think we probably shouldn't speculate unless we absolutely know who it is. And perhaps that person would like to let us know who it is so we can thank them. So with that,
Madam Mayor, I have seen that name in the emails, but whether that's the author's name, I don't know, or who that person is, I don't know. In time, we may come to know that, but we haven't verified the author's identity.
Okay, it'll be like Elena Ferrante. We're not really sure who she is. Okay, so with that, we have a motion by Barnacle and a second by King. It's been so long, I had to think that one back. And we will ask our city clerk to do a roll call vote.
Mayor Barrett,
Yes.
council members Barnacle,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
No,
King,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Posake.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-1. Councilmember Healy voting no.
Thank you, council.
Thank you. And now we are moving on to approval of the minutes. Do I have any corrections or issues with the minutes? Seeing no one raise their hand, the minutes for March 21st will be accepted as submitted. And now we are going on to the approval of the proposed agendas for April 18th and May 2nd. And we need Councilmember Fisher.
Yeah, I'll move approval of the upcoming agendas, please.
Thank you. And Councilmember McDonald.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and Councilmember Barnacle.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask if I sent a resolution to the city manager and the city attorney today sometime, maybe this morning, maybe this afternoon, and I was going to see if it would be possible to get that on one of these upcoming agendas.
Councilmember Barnacle, I haven't had a chance to talk with our city attorney, but I know that there are a couple of you, I think Councilmember Healy as well, who's interested in this. So we will look at it and I'll report back to council when if there's interest that we can bring it back.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Healy.
yeah, I would support that. That would just be a simple motion opposing a particularly cranky bill in the state legislature.
Okay, so thank you. So we have a motion by Fisher and a second by McDonald for the agendas. And the city manager will get back on that resolution to add it as it can be added. So can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Barrett,
Yes.
council members Barnacle,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes,
King,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Posake.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And now, before we go on to our consent calendar, I have asked our city attorney if he would explain a difference in usual process that happens here at the council on item 4F. So maybe he could speak to that before we open the consent calendar.
I'll be happy to do that, Madam Mayor. Thank you. So item 4F is the first in a three-step process that the council is familiar with, I believe, that leads to declaring certain properties that have weeds growing on them nuisance properties that are required to either be self-corrected or to be abated by the city's contractor, and then the cost of that recovered as a lien on the property. And we, as the council also will recall, we're used to doing the segmenting process, whereby council members who own property interests within the conflict radius, which these days is a 500-foot radius, would be recused so that there'd be several actions the council would take so that the resolutions could be adopted without the members voting on properties that they own property near. We're not having to do that with respect to this action. We've gone back and checked prior actions that were similar. Since this, as the first action, is merely a noticing action, the list of properties will change based on some that will self-abate the weed situation, et cetera. The next two of the three hearings, we will have to do that segmenting process, and we'll coordinate that with the council at that time. And we should actually have the analysis done shortly as to those parcels on the list that are within the conflict radius for for each council member. So that's why we're able to just leave this on the consent calendar, proceed at this time. It's merely a notice item. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, thank you, City Attorney. So with that, we will go to the consent calendar, and we have items A through L. And I will see if anyone on the council wants to pull any of those items. Seeing no hands raised, I will ask our city clerk if she has received any correspondence on any of the consent calendar items.
Madam Mayor, no public comments have been received.
Thank you very much. And I will ask our moderator to see if there's anybody in attendance who would like to speak to an item on the consent calendar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At this time, members of the public wishing to speak on consent calendar items only, please raise your hand in Zoom and you'll be called on in turn. We have one hand currently raised, and that is Rakusen. So Rakusen, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you, Patrick. Just a quick comment on the McNear Park water main redevelopment project. Obviously, it looks like outdated infrastructure was being replaced, water mains. Of particular note for me was sewer laterals being replaced. Obviously the project ended up coming in over budget. It was about $3 million. I don't really can't make heads or tails if that's worth it, not worth it. I tend to think it probably is. I think there is a lot of outdated public infrastructure. It's something a lot of people are aware of. So I think, that's a great idea. I guess really what I was interested in here on Western Avenue in our neighborhood, there are a lot of residential property owners staring down the barrel of maybe replacing sewer laterals or having to go ahead with that, especially very shallow sewer laterals built on some of these properties. And it's really, it's a pretty big investment. So I just wondered if that McNear project, I guess, first of all, if the sewer laterals replaced, I believe it was 155 sewer laterals were replaced, if those were all residential properties, and I guess, what was the decision to start there in McNear Park? I would guess the infrastructure was the most outdated there. It was the most obvious problem area to start with, and what the general plan is if more projects like that will be expanding out throughout Petaluma, and if so, throw a little lobby out to do something here on Western Ave as well. Anyway, just wanted any comments around that, and I'm sure there are people, tuning in, and maybe council members themselves who have kind of dealt with these sewer lateral issues. So yeah, any information, greatly appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you for those comments. That is the last hand raised, so I'll turn it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. With that, we'll close public comment on the consent calendar. And I see Councilmember Healy has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Happy to move the consent calendar.
Thank you. And Councilmember Fisher.
I'll second that motion.
And before we take a vote, I don't know if there's anyone on staff who would like to respond to the public question, because people might wonder about that.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I've got our Director of Public Works and Utilities, Chris Bolt. Thanks, Chris.
Yes, hello, good evening. There were quite a few change orders added to this project, as we do with many of our utility projects, to add additional work in order to take advantage of good bid prices. So that's one reason that the price was higher than originally bid. Secondly, it was predominantly residential laterals, and it is part of our perpetual ongoing program in our CAP to continue to address those. So hopefully I've answered the questions.
Thank you very much. And we have a motion by Healy and a second by Fisher, and I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Mayor Barrett?
Yes.
Council members Barnacle?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Healy?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
Kosike?
Yes.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you very much. And with that, we are moving on to new business. And this is item 5A, adopt a resolution recommending appointments to the Mayors and Council Members Association to fill vacancies on regional bodies. And Ms. Gonzalez, would you like to speak to that?
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. This item before you is to adopt a resolution recommending appointments to the Mayor and Council Members Association to fill vacancies on regional bodies. Currently, this is for a LAFCO replacement. We received one letter of interest from Pam Stafford from Roanoke Park.
Thank you very much. Is there any council comment on that? Seeing no comment, I will ask our city clerk if you received any public comment on this item.
Madam Mayor, no public comments were received.
Thank you. And I will ask our moderator to see if there's anyone in attendance who would like to speak to this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you'll be called on in turn. We currently have 27 members of the public in attendees, and none of them have their hands raised. So I'll turn it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. With that, we'll close public comment on this item and I will ask for a motion. Councilmember Fisher.
Yeah, I move approval of the resolution.
Thank you. Councilmember McDonald.
And I offer a second on that.
Thank you. And with that, we will ask for a roll call vote, please.
Mayor Barrett,
Yes.
Council Members Barnacle,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Kosake.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you very much. And with that, we're moving on to item 5B, which is to provide direction for implementation of the City Council's priorities in response to the recommendations of the Ad Hoc Committee Advisory Committee, a Community Advisory Committee on Race Relations in Petaluma for ongoing city DEI programs and civilian oversight of the Petaluma public safety and police accountability to the community. And our city manager, Peggy Flynn, will start this off.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, council members, our esteemed community members, and some of our ad hoc Community Advisory Committee members in attendance and hopefully watching at home, and staff. We're here tonight as a follow-up to our December 13th meeting, where the recommendations from our ad hoc Community Advisory Committee, after a year-long process, were presented and council prioritized next steps, which included staff bringing back recommendations on implementation. This year has been an incredible year of growth and change for the city. As local government, we have a unique responsibility to our community to address racial inequities and examine the systems in which we all live. We must honestly and transparently investigate how our longstanding systems, policies, and practices, unintentional or not, have created and continue to maintain racial inequity, and be ready to boldly change them by integrating racial equity into our routine decision-making processes. Tonight, we'll share our thinking on how best to do this with urgency and meaningful and impactful change. Next slide, please, Erin. So in order, before you tonight, you have a 25-page staff report, but I'd like to synthesize this. Tonight's agenda is the presentation, which is a reminder of why we're here tonight, the work that we've been doing, staff recommendations for council consideration, and next steps. Next slide, please. On December 13th, the council reviewed and prioritized our ad hoc Community Advisory Committee's recommendations. And that is in attachment 1 to the staff report, pages 9 and 10, to give staff specific items to analyze for budgetary, legal, and policy implications and to bring back to council for consideration. These included study current staff capacity to support existing city commissions, committees, and boards in consideration of establishing a DEI commission, hire a DEI consultant and or establish an Office of Diversity and Equity, and provide information on options for civilian police oversight. Next slide, please. As we researched what it would take to establish a new committee or commission, it quickly became very obvious to staff that a lot of staff time is allocated to the support of our advisory bodies. Currently, city staff manage, serve as liaisons to, and support at least 26 commissions, committees, and boards, which provide input to, and in most cases are advisory to, the City Council. These bodies are very important and do essential background work that help to inform council decision-making. But unfortunately, given the sheer number of advisory bodies, we do not have the staffing resources to adequately address their needs, nor consistently provide a meaningful experience, which could ultimately aid us in our work. Next slide, please. While each body varies in level of support, most require agenda management, including staff reports, administration to adhere to Brown Act or other public noticing requirements, and now we are moderating for virtual participation. Each has a different meeting time, frequency, different lengths of meetings, and presents different demands on staff's time. However, the level of staff report required to support and engage our committees, commissions, and boards is substantial. Staff recently conducted a survey of city staff liaisons to these bodies to ascertain the time demands required. In short, on average, it takes an equivalent of 7 full-time employees to support these bodies. And of course, we know that these staff liaisons wear many hats in our organization and are not fully dedicated to committee and commission support. Next slide, please. Now that we've done our homework, staff are recommending to start with a consultant and a plan to inform next steps with the goal of institutional and structural change. Racial equity plans are both a process and a product, and successful process will build staff capacity and expertise, which is essential for implementation. Staff envision a process that staff will become more familiarized with the city's equity vision and our theory of change to achieve a collective vision of racial equity. We believe that this process will inform next steps, which could lead to establishing an in-house Office of Equity and/or Commission on Equity, as well as many other efforts. Next slide, please. We've made some great progress in our city regarding diversity and city hiring and have built upon the city's recruitment, hiring, and retention practices and strategies. While our Human Resources Department has led several ongoing efforts to recruit and retain a diverse workforce, as well as enhance the equity and inclusion of our entire city workforce, this effort has transcended departmental boundaries and has become one of the key lenses staff use our work from. All city job openings are posted on several websites, including those specifically targeted toward generating job applications from a diverse set of candidates. In addition to the city's website, all city openings are linked on a variety of online job posting and recruitment websites. We also post all of our job openings in the city's weekly update mail, which reaches thousands of Petalumans each week. And DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion training in a variety of venues and formats, including implicit bias training for department heads and managers and customized department-specific trainings, have all taken place and are continuing. A variety of instructors have been used, depending upon the need, to maximize the city staff's exposure to multiple styles, viewpoints, and content. We also have started convening an internal BIPOC discussion group to share experiences and viewpoints. And we also have expanded our portfolio of family-friendly benefits, including a newly adopted paid parental leave policy, providing 8 weeks of paid family leave for the birth or adoption of a new child. Healthcare premiums are 95% covered by the city with a variety of quality health plans to choose from. We have created some generous COVID leave benefits, including paid time off in the event of family-related COVID exposures. And our education training reimbursement policy provides employees the opportunity to obtain, maintain, or improve job-related training and education to open the door for growth and promotional opportunities. Also, as of last year, we offer a wellness benefit up to $500 annually to each employee to reimburse for wellness-related expenses. We also have an expansion of bilingual pay for staff in languages in addition to Spanish. We've also established a permanent remote work policy for city employees. The pandemic has forever changed us as an employer, and we recognize the need to accommodate a changing workforce. Sorry about that. I just lost my place. Next slide, please. Of the 19 recommendations from the ad hoc advisory committee, city has made great progress. The yellow represents recommendations that have been implemented or that we've already been doing them even before the recommendations have been made, but we've continued to strengthen our approach to expanding our diversity in our hiring. We continue to broaden our efforts, including removing language barriers. We advertise on many diversity-focused recruiting sites, as I mentioned earlier. We're utilizing more diverse hiring panels. We already have in place a merit-based hiring process. We utilize a variety of recruiters to help us increase candidate pools and are developing recruitment information for various audiences. We also have a website that is translatable into many languages and offer staff bilingual pay to assist us with outreach. We have yet to set up a referral program, but are hoping that a DEI consultant can help us develop a meaningful program to this end. In the green section are analytics and data collection, as well as a potential legislation. We are recommending utilization of a DEI consultant who can take a look at these recommendations and provide a roadmap to implementing them. This would include bringing back an opportunity to be able to, we already collect EEOC data, which is gender and race and ethnicity data for equal opportunity data that we collect on our staff. And we're looking into expanding data collection that could be reported on a voluntary basis for committees and commissions. The Equal Access Ordinance will require additional review and research in conjunction with the City Attorney's Office. The red section is training and retention of a diverse workforce. And 2 of these 3 are effectively implemented. The housing assistance item is going to will require more thought, but the recent increase in salaries for most of our job classifications that the city recently made has made us much more competitive overall with surrounding jurisdictions. But we want to ensure equity in whatever program we develop. The blue section is keeping our pipeline of potential candidates diverse. And so we have been working on various internship and fellowship programs with local educational institutions, including the JC, SSU. COVID has made implementation difficult, but we are continuing to pursue these programs. In fact, the city has hired a number of high school interns in the past 3 years, but would like to create a formal program with Petaluma High Schools and with the colleges as staffing and prioritization allows for. And I am going to turn this over to our city attorney, Eric Danley, to walk us through current police oversight.
Thank you, Peggy. Madam Mayor, council members, members of the public, I'm going to cover a few slides, 3 of them that, as Peggy mentioned, will address the current civilian oversight of the Petaluma Police Department, some categories that assist with those and help implement those, and also the legal framework that exists and has been continuing to develop related to civilian oversight of police. So on this slide, it lists a very high-level org chart as to what are the sources of civilian police oversight in Petaluma, and not unique to Petaluma, because this is basically the sort of baked-in oversight that exists in most city manager forms of government, which Petaluma has by charter. So at the top, obviously, is the city council, the city attorney, the city manager, and the city clerk. As most folks know, and certainly the council knows, are direct reports to the city council. Those are at-will positions, appointees of the council. The police chief and the HR director are at-will appointees of the city manager, so accountable to her. I guess I'll make the distinction that in Petaluma, the police chief, as an at-will appointee of the city manager, is directly accountable and responsive to the manager, unlike, say, the Sonoma County Sheriff, who's an elected official. But because this basic structure depends a lot on how it's implemented, that fact, I think. So, for my part, I'm proud of the teamwork we do to hold the police department accountable and support it, and make sure it's accountable to the council and the public. But because our continued success with doing that has a lot to do with the people in the positions, that to me is support for the community process that the council has initiated, the AHCAC process, receiving its recommendations and giving direction to staff based on those to provide additional transparency and responsiveness to the community. So if we could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So here are some methods addressed in the staff report that provide for policy, training, and accountability resources that support the current civilian oversight of the Petaluma Police Department, as well as the police department operations themselves. They assist with policy, training, accountability recommendations, and can do that in the future with the proposed enhanced oversight structure that's addressed in tonight's presentation and the staff report, as they do now, and as well as implementation of future recommendations for improvements in our structure. So just to touch on these briefly, each is addressed in the staff report. CALEA is an accreditation process that relates to oversight of police by providing standards based on which to determine the police department's performance as against those standards. You saw in the staff report that the police department began on its own initiative to pursue that process. It's not complete, and there are no police departments or law enforcement departments in Sonoma County that have completed that process yet. The other three categories are in place in Petaluma fully. The Lexipol policy system, we like many law enforcement agencies in the state are members of the Lexipol policy service. We customize a lot of our policies, so they're not just the stock ones, but the police department uses those to very good effect in conjunction with the oversight structure that we outlined, with a lot of teamwork with the city manager's office and our office, and is in a real committed process to maintain training and updating of those policies. They're also posted now on the police department's website. The peace officers standards and training system that's discussed in some detail in the staff report provides for ensuring that the officers that are hired are qualified for their jobs at the various levels that they're brought in to the organization. And there's also a continuing education part of that system that's kind of analogous to the one that attorneys and other professionals have to follow to keep their credentials to practice their profession. And then the Sonoma County Law Enforcement Chiefs Association also provides outside review for critical incidents, as discussed in the staff report. So to ensure that those significant law enforcement events are not just investigated in-house, but receive outside review, that the results of which become public ultimately. So could we have the next slide, please? So the last of my slides is to address briefly the existing police accountability laws. These are the state laws, not local ones. And they are in place to protect constitutional rights, provide transparency regarding allegations of police misconduct and investigation of and responses to those allegations. They address eligibility requirements for police officers, protection of the people's right of peaceable assembly and protest, and police use of military type equipment. Many of these new laws are in response to unlawful police actions in other jurisdictions, including the murder of George Floyd, The staff report also summarizes some long-standing police accountability laws, not recent ones, such as, for example, the citizen complaint laws, which have been in effect since I've been practicing for these past 20 years representing public agencies. Our purpose in providing this information is not to suggest, as you could hopefully tell from my comments about our oversight structure that exists in Petaluma, it's not to suggest that state law is sufficient or our existing process is adequate for responding to the council's direction regarding the AHCAC recommendations. Instead, what we're hoping to do with this summary and the more detailed one in the staff report is to help describe the legal framework within which we will be implementing the council's direction regarding law enforcement oversight. Also, we're hoping by this to fill an information gap that has existed following the AHCAC dialogue on race relations. And that's because the members of the AHCAC focused on sharing their perceptions and recommendations for change regarding law enforcement in Petaluma. They had a lot to share, and staffs stayed engaged with that process primarily as listeners. There really wasn't an opportunity to provide extensive information about existing police oversight in Petaluma, state law requirements, new legal developments regarding use of force, prohibited use of force, and other developments. So this information is also intended to inform community members, AHCAC members and others about this legal context, to be fully transparent as to the larger framework within which the council is considering and providing direction to staff about these issues. So that concludes my slides. Thank you.
Thank you.
And our police chief is going to describe the next few slides.
Thanks, City Attorney Danley, and thank you, Mayor Barrett, council members, city staff, and the community we serve. I will be reviewing the 4 police oversight models for you this evening. For those that don't know, the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, or NACOL, is a nonprofit organization established in 1995 to support independent civilian oversight structures that help make local law enforcement agencies more transparent, accountable, and responsive to the communities they serve. NACOL served as the source for information contained in this agenda item, as well as this presentation. I do want to note that agencies listed on the NACOL website are self-reported, and staff found through research many other law enforcement agencies with oversight models not referenced on their site. An example would be Santa Rosa and Rohnert Park. Both use a hybrid model, combining a review-focused body along with an independent police auditor. The 4 models that I'll review tonight are, as you can see, the review-focused model, the audit-focused model, the investigation-focused model, and the hybrid model. The review-focused models have historically been the most common oversight model, using either an individual or group to independently review police misconduct investigations and make findings and/or recommendations. Under the auditor-monitor model, focus models, they've become more common as they share the benefits of the review-focused model and the investigation-focused model without the challenges or high costs associated with the investigation-focused model on its own. And they do this by contracting with a civilian who is professionally trained to review, analyze, and report on allegations of police misconduct to the city manager and the city council. The investigation-focused models are the most complicated and costly models, employing full-time staff to investigate allegations of misconduct independently or in lieu of Department Internal Affairs investigators. And then finally, the hybrid-focused models bring a customized combination of more than one model or system to meet the specific oversight needs of the community and the city. And this is a key oversight principle for NACOL. From here, we will look at some advantages and disadvantages of each model. Next slide, please. The review-focused model, as you can see on the advantages side, quicker review, community involvement, and a reduction of police bias. On the disadvantages, it's advisory only, no access to confidential information, and a limited ability to promote large-scale change. Review-focused models have either been established as a Chiefs Advisory Group, Community Roundtable, or Community Advisory Group made up of a diverse group of community members to review, discuss, and make recommendations regarding police policies and practices. As you saw from the staff report tonight for consideration, would be a Public Safety Advisory Group. While the review model would have limited legal authority and less expertise, the body can serve a key role for providing community input on important policing practices and policies. This model is used by Novato, Santa Rosa, and Roanoke Park locally. Next slide, please. An example of a public safety advisory group, as mentioned earlier, would be a body created via a lottery system similar to the fairgrounds visioning process from within the 6 adopted city council districts. The advisory body could work directly with the city manager, the city attorney, and the police chief to implement and develop a community outreach plan, provide input on and recommend improvements to police policies, procedures, and training, review and comment on independent police auditor reports on civilian complaints, and engage the city manager, city attorney, and police chief in ongoing dialogue about police department challenges, initiatives, programs, resource needs, new legal developments, and developments in public safety best practices. Next slide, please. The auditor monitor focused model, clearly the most effective and increases public credibility, requires a high level of training and expertise, promotes long-term systematic change, and a robust reporting and tracking system. On the disadvantages, there is some public skepticism if it's staffed or managed by the law enforcement agency. It's dependent upon the quality of the consultant or auditor and cannot compel change, only make recommendations. Agencies that use the independent auditor monitor model include Santa Rosa and Roanoke Park locally. Next slide, please. The investigation-focused model is the most independent form of oversight. Obviously, more staff-intensive that are dedicated to oversight efforts, increased public confidence in this model. It is the most costly of all models, and investigators may harbor either pro or anti-police bias. And obviously, they may be more willing to challenge an officer's account of events in the oversight efforts. This model is most commonly used when agencies have been under or are under review by the Department of Justice after demonstrating a pattern or practice of misconduct and/or civil rights violations. And that concludes my review of the 4 models for you this evening, and I'll turn this back over to City Manager Flynn to present the staff recommendations related to police oversight this evening.
Thank you, Chief Savano. So after researching the various models, staff is proposing a hybrid model because we feel that it has the benefits of all 3 models that include establishing an independent civilian oversight, which would be the independent police auditor. The committee to establishing a committee to identify ways to increase dialogue, build relationships, humanize police and community. And this is from the ad hoc recommendations, and embrace restorative justice. Also having a committee to review and recommend on ongoing police training. So we see that in the Public Safety Advisory Group. And then the oversight system that helps guide us is the CALIA accreditation, which takes, I think, 3 years to secure. And with that, I'm going to turn this back over to our police chief to go through this specific model, this hybrid model.
Thank you, City Manager Flynn. As you can see from this slide here, it strikes a balance between review and investigation models and the Nicole principles of civilian oversight. It's also responsive to the ad hoc recommendations, as the city manager mentioned. It is the most cost-effective and efficient model, not requiring any additional staffing outside of the independent police auditor to achieve the benefits of all 3 models. Access is increased to otherwise confidential information and to city staff. It is independent, as the independent auditor has access and can independently review police misconduct cases. There's community involvement built into this, and the Public Safety Advisory Group would work with the professionally trained independent auditor, and it focuses on community policing standards through the CALIA accreditation. And for those that aren't familiar, the CALIA is the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, and it is a lengthy process. And as mentioned, there are only 19 agencies in the state of California that have been accredited by CALIA. It would obviously provide the standards for review and for greater accountability within the agency and to the public. And I just want to state that as a police agency, we have tried to find the best model or system for oversight following not only Andy Lopez, but the events in Ferguson, Missouri that produced the task force report on 21st century policing that highlighted the importance of oversight to build strong community trust and confidence. To that end, as mentioned, we attempted back in 2015 to become a CALEA accredited agency. And we believe strongly that the proposed hybrid oversight model before you will help us be even better than we have been. I would like to thank the ad hoc members and the City Council for working with us to get here tonight to take the next step forward to build even stronger trust and confidence with those we serve. And with that, I'll turn this back to City Manager Flynn for a final summary of staff recommendations from this item tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief Sabano. So the recommendations that were provided by the HCAC provided the city with a vision informed by those who have real expertise. Our communities of color impacted by institutional and structural racism. This vision has helped us set an actionable course toward achieving racial equity, to reprioritize our work to change longstanding systems and structures, and create a culture of learning and reflection to improve upon the work as we go. Our recommendations tonight reflect our city's unwavering commitment to that progress and to government transformation for the people, by the people. And our recommendations here are to get direction from council to work with a consultant in short order to create a racial equity action plan, which will give us a baseline of the issues that our communities of color are have expressed, and so we can address what this, how the city can advance progress in that area. Continue to bolster diversity in hiring, city hiring, training, and outreach, and to not only retain but attract a diverse workforce. And then, as the police chief mentioned, the hybrid model, hiring an independent auditor, establish a public safety advisory group, and pick up where we left off on achieving the CALEA accreditation. And next slide, please. So next steps, if this is the way council wants to go, is we can put out an RFP fairly quickly for an independent police auditor and have somebody in place by the start of our next fiscal year, which would be July 1. Putting out an RFP for DEI consultants and getting this racial equity action plan. The city has recently joined membership with the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, which is a nonprofit joint project of the Haas Institute and the Center for Social Inclusion, that is a network of government agencies that are looking to lead and in their work on racial equity. Also, we would be establishing the Public Safety Advisory Group in this next fiscal year, and jumpstart the CALEA certification. So we are looking at doing these all in short order if this is something that the council is interested in us pursuing. And with that, I'm going to close our presentation and turn it back to council for questions and deliberation.
Thank you very much. I will just ask a question just to start off. In your recommendations, the hiring a police auditor, who would do that? How would that be done?
We would put out a request for proposal, and the city manager, I would solicit that RFP and put together a panel and do interviews and hire that individual.
I guess what my meta question is how would the qualifications of that person be established for an RFP?
Well, we have a lot of jurisdictions to look, to follow, and there are quite a number that have independent police auditors. And I think we would take best practices from those and pull together an RFP.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so 3 hands are up. Councilmember Healy, followed by the Vice Mayor Posake and Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So great staff presentation. I'm inclined to support the staff recommendation, but I had 2 questions and 1 comment. And the first question was, there was the assertion that we would have a need to consolidate or eliminate 5 of our existing committees or commissions. And there seemed to be a disconnect between that and the staff recommendation. So I was hoping staff could maybe square the circle on that for us.
Sure. No, thank you. I might have skipped over that in my presentation. So there was a request at the December 13th meeting for staff to look into potentially us establishing a DEI commission. But before we did that, to provide information on what the current status is of all of our committees and commissions and boards. And so what we're saying is that if council's interested in establishing a DEI commission, that we would need to, in order to build that staff bandwidth to create the DEI commission, we would need to either consolidate and or eliminate 5 CCBs in order to accommodate what we feel is going to be a very significant staff intensive commission through a DEI commission. That answer.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. And I have some suggestions on that, but I don't really want to talk in front of a microphone tonight on that. And I'd be happy to talk with the city manager the next time we talk and share some suggestions and insights, but I don't really want to start because all of our commissions or committees are rather cherished. So that's going to be a tough ask.
Agreed.
And then the second question was, how does the staff recommendation play into the Brown Act? Will these be open meeting bodies or will there be some work done behind closed doors? That's probably a city attorney question.
Well, I think that's an implementation question, and depending on the council direction, we've seen in some of our recent work on the HCAC itself, on the visioning process for the fairgrounds, what the sort of range of choices is there in terms of perfectly Brown Act compliant choices of formalized bodies selected by the council, Brown Act bodies versus ones that are not and can choose between public meetings and not. It seems to me, since this is a transparency focused exercise, that it skews in that direction, which would be more formalized bodies, but the council has some choices about that, and with the staff recommendation tonight, there would be some implementation choices to be made, on the part of the council that we'd come back with, particularly with respect to those bodies. As Peggy noted, soliciting and retaining an auditor can be a relatively straightforward process, but the bodies, I think, we need to present choices and receive direction from the council.
Right. No, I totally agree that this whole exercise is one of transparency, but the countervailing point is that some of these models involve confidential information.
That's
and
correct.
I just want to make sure we're mindful of that. And then just very briefly, my one comment was that the discussion about a permanent remote work policy for city employees, that's certainly an upside in some regards, but one downside is that it's harder to mentor new employees, including employees of color, and I just want us to be mindful of that issue going forward. And that's all I had on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have one question and then maybe a couple of comments. In terms of the CALIA accreditation, I think I could be getting mixed up because I don't have it in front of me right now, but I believe there's a basic and an advanced accreditation through them. And I was wondering if the 3-year program is just a basic or is that advanced?
That's correct, Councilmember Posticare, Vice Mayor, sorry. There are two levels, and we would certainly be pursuing the highest level possible, but we could bring back more details on that. But there are two levels, yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. I would just like to add that I am almost completely in support of the staff recommendations. I did a lot of research of this on my own and really came immediately after the HCAC report and came to a very similar point that the staff's coming to. So I really appreciate the fact that we're in agreement on that. And the one question I have is in terms of the citizens committee that's affiliated with the auditor. As much as I have supported and am in support of the healthy democracy lottery method of selecting a large group of folks to make recommendations on the fairgrounds, I'm not sure that that applies so well to this, and I would want to think a lot more about whether we should actually interview people for something like that and choose them as similar to the way we've chosen other committees at City Council. But I'm certainly willing to hear more about that. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Fisher, followed by Councilmember Barnacle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of follow-up question on the CALEA certification. So we apparently were going through the process and then stopped, is my understanding, and it's a 3-year process so where are we and how much longer is that going to take?
Thank you, Councilmember Fisher. We began the process in 2015 and continued the process through about 2018 when, while we were in the 3-year self-assessment phase, they tripled the standards for accreditation, and simply out of staffing and resources and funding, we were not able to follow through on that. So what we're committing to is not only reinstituting that process, but properly resourcing the department to do it and to follow through.
And so how many, is it another 3 years from now then, before that's?
It can be, it's a 3-year, you have to show proof of standards that they have for a total of 3 years, where when we were in the process, it was a 1-year proofing requirement. So it could take up to 3 years depending upon standards that we may not already be meeting, but we have to show the proof for them. So even if we have been doing it, if we don't have proof, we'd have to show 3 years going forward to receive that accreditation.
Great, thank you. And question, I guess, for City Manager, the Racial Equity Action Plan, what do you see that containing, or how do you see that process moving forward, if you thought about it?
Well, I've read a lot about these plans, and really it's helping us set a baseline, but something customized for our city, and really helping us set those goals for action rather than kind of just throwing things up against the wall and saying, okay, well, this is, checkbox, we've got this done. It's really to an end of changing our systems and really thoroughly going, citywide, going through our policies and protocols and really coming out at the end, as a city that's leading in racial equity, and that our staff, it's reflected in our staff, and it's reflected in the way we do business, but just a really thorough plan to have somebody come in and help guide us, because we don't have all the answers. So we really need that blueprint.
Got it. Thank you. And there was, our committee talked a lot about restorative justice, and I'm not hearing much about that in the presentation, and wondering how empowering the restorative justice, or embracing it, how that fits into your thoughts for staff in this report.
Police Chief Savano?
Yes, sorry, I thought she was asking you, City Manager Flynn. Certainly, we've seen great success with restorative processes with our juvenile population, our youth, and we absolutely embrace it. Could make it part of the purpose and charge of the Public Safety Advisory Group to evaluate restorative processes in our community.
Great, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Barnacle, followed by Councilmember King and McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Couple of questions. First question is, the staff report mentioned other Sonoma County cities that are doing similar hybrid approaches, but it didn't really talk about how our proposed approach is similar or different than what Santa Rosa or Runner Park, or I think even Sebastopol's done it. Can you talk a little bit about what we're proposing relative to what the other cities in Sonoma County have moved forward with?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Barnacle. So in specifically what we're seeing is a review-focused model in the form of a community committee or advisory group, as we have proposed. And then additionally, that's coupled with an independent police auditor. What we are proposing that's different is the CALEA accreditation, but most of the objectives that I outlined in the Public Safety Advisory Group with regard to public outreach, community input, reviewing complaints and police misconduct cases and investigations, and then working towards and having discussions with the community about policing matters, are all very similar to what the other communities that have a hybrid model are doing. The CALEA accreditation appears to be a unique effort on our part because it's such a demanding and difficult accreditation process. We really want to strive for that certification.
Thanks, appreciate that. Are the other cities using the same auditor?
Some are, as we mentioned in the report, OIR is one that several agencies have used. And there's a list of the agencies that are currently working with OIR, but I'm sure there are others out there that we can look at.
Okay. So my other question is part of the, and this is probably for you, City Manager, is the ad hoc mentioned there was a whole section on working with the schools and with the action plan and even the commission. Is there been any connection with the schools on this? I know it's not our jurisdiction to tell the schools what they should be doing, but I just am wondering, like, are we trying to build, foster partnerships and things like that? Because I certainly have had conversations with school board members and with leadership in the administration there about this sort of thing.
You hit the nail on the head. We don't have jurisdiction over the various school districts, but we do work with the school districts on a variety of things. And on this specific effort, we had representation from at least 2 or 3 key of the larger school districts. And circling back, we need to reach back out to all the school districts and just say, here are the recommendations we heard from our advisory committee, and how can we work together to, and I think if we can get this a racial equity action plan drafted, we'd want to pull in our school partners and see if there is some benefit of working together to advance some of these, whether it's diversity in hiring, a variety of things that could definitely help, I think, both organizations.
That was more my thinking, not so much of the makeup of the ad hoc, but looking forward, what's our plans to act to, I just don't like the idea of, like, it's not our jurisdiction. We don't do that. It's more like, where can we have an influence and how can we partner? And so in bringing back that RFP, I'd like to see, like, active participation from our schools in that, and just to show commitment to it. If they were there and making recommendations for it, I would think that moving forward with the action, they'd want to be partaking in it.
Agreed.
Great. My last piece is really just a comment, so I'll save that.
Thank you very much, Councilmember King, followed by Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a couple of questions and then just some clarification on what staff is seeking tonight. And because I do have some comments on that, pending public comment. But one of the questions I had was about the independent police auditor and the economic cost, if I read that part of the report correctly, was estimated to be about $25,000 a year. That was, I believe, what the Palo Alto model had listed. That seems somewhat low to me. And I just wanted to get a sense of what staff had in terms of whether this person would be on call via a contract or how that would work in coordination with the Civilian Police Oversight Committee.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember King. If I may, City Manager. The research that we did, and we can structure the professional services agreement with an IPA to meet the needs of our city. And I think that we could obviously have some further discussions about that, but that has been the range for the work that the independent police auditor has done for other jurisdictions. Certainly, if we expand that scope, the cost would go up, but we're not limited by any means to how we engage the independent police auditor. But we would certainly want to make sure that it's meeting the expectations for you as a council and our community.
Thank you. I mean, I'm not opposed to saving the city money. Obviously, I don't think anybody up here is. I just in looking at that just seemed a little on the low side for the work that might need to be done. But I suppose we'll find that out when and if it goes out to bid. I mean, that's really where we'll know. My comments at this point are that I'm inclined to support the staff recommendation to establish a hybrid civilian oversight model with the auditor and to hire a DEI consultant. I want to hear from the public. I want to hear if there's any other comments from my colleagues, but that's my inclination. I agree with Councilmember Posake. I'm going to hold off on whether the lottery is the best way to do this in terms of finding people until I'd like to see how the healthy democracy process works with our other lottery. That'll give us give the council and the public some idea of the effectiveness of that. And I think by the time we get to that, the decision making on that, we may have some good insight on how the healthy democracy process works. I am still in favor of establishing a DEI commission, and the staff report made a request as to what we would want the commission to look at some point. I don't know if tonight is the night or not, but if you want to get my comments, I can provide them now or I can provide them later. But I know that's a long-term down the line, not long-term, like 10 months, I think the report said, or to a year before getting it up and running. Given that I'm not going to be here in 10 months, I'd like to get my comments in before I go. But I do have a few there. And then you did ask about eliminating committees and commissions and reducing staff time. So I have a couple comments. I will say one other way to look at reducing staff time is examining some of these committees and commissions to determine if monthly or twice monthly meetings are needed for each of them. I've been on the Transit Advisory Committee as a representative. I think this is maybe my 4th year. We don't meet every month anyway, but it may be something where bi-monthly will save some degree of staff time. The second thing that's been discussed sort of out loud among the public is consolidating some of these committees and or commissions together. If that is going to happen, it's in the report, I think it's imperative that each of those potentially consolidated committees and commissions have some input. I know we've talked about combining senior and youth, and I know we received correspondence from a senior advisory committee member recently I'd like to, I'm the Youth Commission liaison. I would like to see what the youth commissioners have to say about that. Same with the others. And so, since I'm not sure if this is comment time or just question time, I'm going to stop, but I do have some comments with specific relating to the DEI Commission and what they should or should not be looking at.
Thank you. And I think we'll save those for after we hear from the public, but tonight might be a good time to hear those. So Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. I too want to thank the staff for this report. It's a long road coming to this point, and I think we've got a very good product here. I'm supportive generally of the items on the table, and most of my questions have been asked and answered in prior council back and forth, but I do want to just touch in on the financial side of it. I think a lot of the actual DEI questions are asked, but the financial questions are always nagging. And the staff report lists out maybe 112,000 plus any Measure U monies that are baked into what's going on. And I concur with Councilman King. It seems like a very good price for what we're getting. I want to make sure that we're not shorting ourselves on some of that issue. It's not an overwhelming ask for what we're getting, so I'm pretty pleased with that. And then I was trying to do the math on what an average committee time, that 170 hours a year, and even that seems like underselling what the staffers put in for each of the committees, but that's like a tenth of a person per year. I think that works out to be in hours, and 5 committees could be half of a person. Am I doing that math right? What we're asking for is about a half of full-time equivalent for the commission. 5 committees consolidated would give us enough staff time at 170 per average. That's about a half, 5 times 1/10 of a person.
Kind of depends on the position, but yes, relatively, that's about equal to half a person.
I was kind of think that we could, it'd be worth a dedicated half a person here and not cutting into those, as the phrase was used, cherished commissions, unless their time has come. But I think if we're saying it's an average, cutting the transit commission won't get you the half person you need. And so, yeah, I would rather we fund up on this if that's the math. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to just quickly say that I want to reiterate the importance of restorative justice going forward. And also, I too was concerned about the recommendations that included a lot of reaching out to the schools, because I do think that that is really important. And I'm also concerned that it is also not our jurisdiction. So I think that, it would definitely be in our interests and in the community's interest to, whatever path we decide on tonight, to have a very clear letter going out to all the school districts that feed into Petaluma schools, our population, to make sure that they are on board with what is happening, and to get some kind of commitment from them about either being part of what we're doing or being apprised of what is going on as in real time. So however that happens, that's up for future discussion. But I think we do need to take the lead in terms of reaching out and making sure that this is something that's going to happen community-wide. So with that, unless staff wants to reply to any comments that they heard, I would like to go to public comment. So it's not seeing staff's hands up. I will ask our City Clerk if she has received any public comment on this item.
Madam Mayor, the city received 4 public comments which have been posted online.
Thank you very much. And so now I'll go to our moderator and ask Patrick to see if there's anybody in the attendance of 32 people who would like to be heard from on this item at this time.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand in Zoom and you'll be called on in turn. We currently have 6 hands raised. So our first speaker is Chip Atkin, followed by Chris JRN. Chip, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Hi, thank you. How does the hybrid model relate to IOLARO? The county has a process, the county sheriff's department, for oversight. And as I understand, cities can contract into that, to the IOLARO model. And I think there's some advantage to that. Because there's been a lot of community support, and it supports an institution that can help law enforcement all throughout the county. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Next speaker is Chris JRN, followed by Josh Simmons. Chris, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you, Patrick. Hi, Council. Christopher Neugebauer here. I'd like to call attention to the suggestion of hiring a consultant to create an equity action plan. The experience in the County of Sonoma with their Office of Equity has shown that hiring equity staff without direct authority to correct behavior in county departments has resulted in ineffective outcomes, and indeed the approach is irretrievably counterproductive. Staff with actual authority to run the programs tend to become empowered to leave equity outcomes on the table, because the responsibility for equity does not sit with the responsibility for implementing the rest of the program. Nobody is truly empowered or incentivized to fix things. Indeed, since the establishment of a permanent county Office of Equity, 2 department heads in the county resigned last year due to overt and implicit racist behavior throughout the county workforce. Compared to a separate Office of Equity, staff hiring a short-term consultant with terms of reference set by staff is likely to produce even weaker outcomes. Please consider instead hiring a permanent Chief Equity Officer with a view to eventually giving them staff who can be embedded in other city departments, especially the police department, and have them report directly to the mayor and council outside the reporting structures headed by the city manager or the city attorney. They should have similar authority to the attorney or the manager, not simply provide advice to them. Hiring a consultant to advise staff is a waste of city money if the outcomes end up being filtered through existing reporting lines. Like it or not, city staff continue to perpetuate inequitable outcomes. Hiring a consultant whose reports need to be shaped and signed off by the city manager will do the same. Staff who have already shown themselves to be ineffective at equity will not know what things to highlight and will not know appropriate prioritization. Do not make the same mistake as the county and hire staff without real authority. Hire an effective and ideally permanent Chief Equity Officer and give them the power to tell you directly where the rest of the staff are doing the wrong thing. Should a permanent officer not be possible, at least make sure that the consultant is selected, has their terms of reference set by, and eventually reports directly to council. This process really needs to inform our elected officials and not be filtered through staff. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Chris. Our next speaker is Josh Simmons, followed by a telephone caller. Josh, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, City staff, fellow members of the public. Building on the previous comment, I just would like to say that we cannot achieve cultural change through a series of consultant engagements, all of which get filtered through the lens of current staff, lovely as they may be. We need to hire experts, embed them full-time, and make sure that there are people whose jobs includes equity in every single department in the city. Recognizing that is a resource intensive activity, that is something we can build towards, starting with a full-time director in terms of equity. Further, on the matter of police oversight, an auditor sounds like a great idea. But though I hear Santa Rosa being referenced as an example here, I've not heard a single word about how that has played out in reality. If I understand it correctly, and I did some research before making this comment to double check this, they got a whole lot of truth out of Auditor Bob Aronson, didn't like what they heard, fired him, and left the position unfilled for years, 3 years to be exact. Only in December did they finally approve a new contract. If the day-to-day operation of oversight is contingent on a single paid position or contract that the city can choose to leave unfilled, then it is not enough. A specific note about the proposed Public Safety Advisory Group. I agree with Vice Mayor Posake that a lottery may be ill-suited here as a mechanism for filling this group. Expertise and interest in the subject matter are important, requisite even. Echoing another commenter, perhaps looking more deeply at contracting with Iolero is a better way to go. I genuinely don't know, but clearly we need to do a little more work here. And strange as it may be, I must echo Councilmember Healy's sense of concern about the staff report's accounting of committees, commissions, and boards, and the recommendation that 5 may need to be eliminated or consolidated if we are to spin up a DEI commission. Look, I'm not here to argue the laws of physics, the scarcity of time, or limited budgets, but I have to say it feels inappropriate for the pursuit of DEI to be pitted against other forms of community engagement. Hell, beyond inappropriate, it seems like a surefire way to provoke a reaction from the community who support those other, are supported by those CCBs, which could get the whole idea stopped. Please look at what it would take to better resource staff to continue on the path of increasing and improving community engagement. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Josh. Our next speaker is a phone caller with the last 4 digits of 0694, followed by Zyra. So you may unmute by pressing *6 and begin your comments.
Mayor Barrett, members of the City Council, my name is Jim Duffy. I live in Runner Park, and I'm a NACOL certified practitioner. I want to start by congratulating you and your staff on your excellent recommendation for a hybrid civilian oversight model. Really a fantastic thing. I do want to clear up some misconceptions that were issued today by staff. Neither Rohnert Park nor Santa Rosa has effective civilian oversight in a hybrid model in place. Both of them are still in development. In fact, if you direct your staff tonight to come back to you with an ordinance for a community body, you will be the leader of the pack ahead of the game. They have talked about it. Neither of those city councils has directed staff to come back for the community body ordinance. The RFP to hire a auditor, if you send it to NACOL with $300, they will put it on their website for 60 days and also broadcast it on their listservs. So that's a good way to do some outreach. The lottery option for putting people on your community body, some places have done that. And the way that they're going about it is you actually do interview all the candidates and pre-qualify them. You figure out who is good to be on the body. And then if you pre-qualify 30 people and you're only going to have 10 on the body, you pick the names from there. That I'm not proposing that you do it this way, but the people who have done it this way says it relieves pressure off the elected officials because they don't get called on for picking their favorite people for a board. I'm thrilled to hear Chief Savano say that you're going for the advanced CALIA certification. That is fantastic. You might have very light public comment tonight for this item compared to what you've had in the past, because many people are at the sheriff's candidate debate that Iolero CAC is hosting tonight. And there is no contracting into Iolero. I was one of the authors of Measure P. That's something that has been talked about for years and kicked around, but there is no mechanism to contract for a city to contract into the Iolero office at this point. Thank you for taking my comments, and thank you so much for all your great work. This is really, really heartening.
Thank you for those comments. Our next speaker is Zaira, followed by Sarah Sebastian. Zaira, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thanks so much, Patrick. I'll make this brief because the previous three commentators said what I needed to say. The only comment that I do want to reiterate is the staffing report on its own gives you more of an example of why we need DEI. I mean, it does pit communities against each other. Equity needs to be a priority in our city, as we have seen racial slurs in our schools. We've seen not enough transparency with the Novello case, and the list goes on and on and on, which is why it's important that we need to start restoring trust. I don't think the lottery makes sense. Yes to the recommendation for NACOL to do the RFP, just because in Santa Rosa, I sat through the OIR report, and unfortunately it lacked substance and it failed to address the human rights report. So that would be the way to go. And again, echoing what the Josh and Chris had mentioned before. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Zaira. Our next speaker is Sarah Sebastian, followed by S. Kirks. Sarah, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming back to us with all of this work that was months and months and months and years in action. We appreciate that there are some recommendations here. Now, as I read through the report that was given that is on the agenda, there are many more than 3 or 4 recommendations that were put forth to the City Council, and I look forward to hearing what the City Council members feel about all of the other recommendations that were made and how we're going to be able to implement those. I echo the other speakers in regards to having a full-time equity officer that is experienced in both collective impact and results-based accountability that can move with and throughout a coalition or a partnership with the school boards, community members, board of supervisors, nonprofits, because a lot of the issues that we have here do not leave, as you all know, within the city limits. They are all over. They're in the schools, they're in the health department, they're in the police, they're in the city and the county. What we need is a lens with which that we will see all through. This cannot be done by a part-time or a one-time consultant that is hired for a short period of time. It needs to be a lens with which we move through all of our work. I also echo what everyone else was saying, that it cannot be at the stake or at the cost of other committees, and we must find a way to be able to resource this and make it a priority in all that we do. We really appreciate everything that you're working towards, and we see this, that you're moving towards making this a reality. There's a lot more work to be done, and we look forward to a vote coming on today to let us know how you're going to be moving forward with this in earnest, and see how we can continue to make Petaluma a more equitable and just and safe place for all of our members. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments, Sarah. Our next speaker is S. Kirks, followed by Faith Ross. You may unmute and begin your comments.
The first comment I would like to make is to express gratitude to the residents who served on the ad hoc committee, the advisory committee. Such courage, such honesty, such opportunity for those of us in the community who attended all of the meetings to simply listen and give input as appropriate. It was an educational experience and continues to be, and I really want to see their work seen through you as the elected officials here. I want to see their work uplifted and honored. And I just have to say, this idea of having a lottery for an oversight committee is probably not appropriate at all. I appreciate the comments about wanting to see how things work, and maybe it will work, maybe it won't. I'll just be very direct and say it is not an appropriate recommendation for this type of body. I would like to recommend that you elected officials look to the members of the advisory committee for guidance on this. Who on that committee would want to serve on a civilian oversight committee? Who on that committee would have recommendations of others who would be appropriate to serve on the oversight committee? I'd also like to support the comment of Chris earlier about hiring a chief equity officer whose reporting relationship is to the elected officials of the city of Petaluma. This process will not work unless there is an ability for someone who is an employee to be able to freely assess diversity, equity, and inclusion in our city government and have that reporting relationship and communication. So I really appreciate the comments that have been made by all the commenters tonight. And I hope that you will, again, honor the work of this advisory committee and make appropriate decisions. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Our next speaker is Faith Ross. Faith, you may unmute and begin your comments. Faith, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Good evening, and thank you for this report. I've read it this evening, and I just have a couple of comments. The first one is that we have to have all of our school districts buying into these changes. Without that, the city can't move forward. We can't, as a community, move forward. And so I don't know how you do it, but you've got to have all of the districts involved in this. The other thing is the equity officer. I really believe that we need to have a person there versus a consultant. And then the Citizens Oversight Committee. I don't think that a lottery is a good idea for that particular committee. It needs to be done in a different way. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith. Our next speaker is John Hanania. John, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Good evening. I do agree with the majority of the speakers. I think they're right on the money. I agree with the second speaker. It doesn't make any sense at all to hire somebody who is going to have to go and get approval from the city manager. As far as I'm concerned, the city manager is doing major cover-up, and you need to eliminate that and have somebody who absolutely can make the right choice and not do a cover-up. That's one. Two, I don't think you need consultant or you need to hire somebody from the outside in order for the current administration of the police department to be transparent. The police department, just with the most recent incident, have lied, flat out lied to the community. And when I did ask in a public record request in every possible way that you can think of, the city attorney's response was that they have no record of it. What did Ken Savano do? 15 months later, he goes publicly that, the incident that took place and he was put in administrative leave, but yet they couldn't be honest to me when I asked about it, and the deputy chief have lied right to my.
John, I'm sorry, I'm going to pause you right there. Can you please return to the subject at hand? You're veering off topic. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. But anyway, I think you need to make the right decision, and you don't need to hire somebody who is going to get the city manager's approval. And the lottery, I think it's just a joke, because how do you know, or how can you tell the community that each person who participate in that lottery, his name is in that, mix? And that's all I have to say. And Patrick, thanks a lot for keeping interrupting me, because I do believe I was on topic.
Thank you for those comments. Our next speaker is Sheila Baker. Sheila, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Oh, hi. Thank you very much. Hello, Patrick. Hello, City Council, and hello, Mayor and Vice Mayor. I like Jim Duffy's idea of the lottery to the candidates are pre-qualified, and then from those pre-qualified candidates, the lottery happens. So this isn't just random people like the fair democracy group. And so I also wanted to mention that I really like Jim Duffy's letter as well. And but and I greatly appreciate that he recognized that things are going the right way as far as the advanced accreditation. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak, and good work. Thanks.
Thank you, Sheila. And that is the last hand. So I will turn it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And with that, we'll close public comment on this item and bring it back to the council. Councilwoman Fisher.
Thank you. I want to comment on the committees and commissions issue and whether or not, and apparently we're hiring the consultant to decide whether or not we should have a DEI commission and what that would look like. And just for clarification for the public. And, I think we really need to take a hard look at our committees and commissions and the work that they do. And is it really serving us in 2022? And what is their real purpose? Is it really to help us achieve our goals, which is what I would like the committees and commissions to be doing, is helping us reach our goals. And how to make them more similar and more consistent in terms of how they are staffed and what their decision making is and how they are approached by staff so that they really are useful bodies and provide a meaningful service for us. Could tree commission, committee be along with Parks and Recreation? I think so. I don't know that there's, that they independently do things that are so separate that they couldn't be acting together. But so I would like us to really to look at those in totality and see what will serve us best. And then another recommendation from this group was to create a multicultural center. And I assume that if we have a DEI commission or a committee, that they will be reviewing the other recommendations from the ad hoc. Just want to get some clarification on that so we don't lose those items that were coming before us as recommendations. And I know we can't do everything at once, although we always try to.
Thank you. I think, and staff, you jump in, but from my reading of the staff report, that staff was telling us what they have already accomplished, what they're on the road to accomplishing, and the things that have not been accomplished. I'm thinking of those 19 bullet points that were in the report. And I think our city manager had a slide that sort of referred to those, but not each 19, but in a different format. But yes, I agree with Councilwoman Fisher that this would be something that the equity hire would be letting us know where we need to be putting our energy and what hasn't been attained and where we can go. But if staff wants to jump in on that, feel free. Okay, I'll keep going then. Councilmember Barnacle, followed by Councilmember Healy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, so I'll pick up where Councilmember Fisher left off on the committees. I brought this up at the goals and priorities. I currently sit on a commission right now, the Music Parks and Rec Commission, where we routinely have one agenda item. For example, placement of the chess tables. Placement of the chess tables also went to the senior committee. And there was probably 2 times as many people on the panel, so staff and the commissioners, as were in the audience. So maybe people are watching on public access, but certainly there's a lot of staff time that goes into that. There's a lot of commission and committee member time that goes into that, and we're not actually giving back that much on so many fronts. We're not reaching our potential in terms of delivering value. We constantly hear presentations that said, we gave this presentation to the Climate Commission, we gave this presentation to the Youth Commission. And so we have staff that are going around and going to different commissions and giving the same presentation. And what it's saying to me is that we all have a lot more in common than we think. I got some pushback when I suggested that the Youth Commission and the Senior Commission could become the age-friendly commission. And then I started talking to someone and said, well, both of them have mobility challenges, where they rely on public transit more than other residents in the city. The Senior Commission or Senior Committee meets 6 times a year. Maybe it could meet 12 times a year, so you get more of an ear of staff. And by halfway through the conversation, the person was interested in it. And I think that if we open our minds, we can think of much better ways to staff this. 290 hours is what they quoted as an estimate for supporting a committee, commission, or board. With that, if we average 5 hours per meeting, we could translate 58 meetings and make it cost neutral. That's almost 5 commission committees and boards. We could translate all their meetings. That's the Planning Commission, PBAC, all these commissions. So I think outside of whether I think that the DEI commission should happen, I think that we need to be looking at consolidating committees, commissions, and boards. In terms of hiring a consultant, I generally think that consultants give you what you want them to give you for the most part. I'm more inclined to make it an in-house person. I'm intrigued by the idea of having it report to council, but I don't think that's a good idea. I think that the person needs to be integrated with the team. And probably the biggest reason why I think we should, strongly consider making it an in-house person is because so much of implementing that action plan is going to come from the relationships that are developed from the course of creating it. It's my belief. And so if we're creating an action plan that includes the schools and includes the community groups that are out there, the relationships that person, if that's their first task, forge over the course of, let's say, a year of creating this action plan or 6 months or whatever, that gives us the momentum as we go to start implementing it. So I'm more inclined to support an in-house staff person than a consultant at this point. And I think that whatever comes of that action plan, I do believe we should probably have some sort of a blueprint, a baseline. I like that comment, City Manager. If it's believed that we need to have a DEI commission, we should move forward with it at that point. But it should probably be driven by need. I remember when the Climate Commission first got started, the first thing was like, well, what the heck do we do now? We've got a commission. And what did we do? Like, the commission got together and created the climate framework with members of the community. But it was a heck of a lot of sweat equity from the community. And I would say that most good things that happen because of a lot of sweat equity from the community, whether it's relief or saving our heritage forest or the ad hoc committee. It's the pressure that they put on us is what gets us to move. And so, yeah, I guess that's where I feel on that. In general, I'm supportive of the forms of oversight that were suggested, and looking forward to hearing what the rest of the council has to say.
Thank you. Councilmember Healy, followed by Councilmember King.
Thank you. So just very briefly, I'll just reiterate that I do support the staff recommendations, with the one exception that I'm unlikely to support a lottery method for selecting members of the Public Safety Advisory Body. And that's all I had for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember King, followed by Vice Mayor Kosake.
Well, thank you. Well, there's an awful lot of requests from staff to us to provide input, so I'm just going to go through most everything I've got here, and then we can figure it out from there. I'll start with a support for the hybrid civilian oversight model that was recommended by staff. I think that is a good start, and I think something that can be incorporated fairly soon in the process. I mean, one of the things, that happens at the city council level and staff is we want to get to our goals yesterday, and it invariably takes more time than just yesterday. That would be the way I would look at this. And I would rather go about and do something that's a little more certain as we go forward, and as the decision makers on this go forward. So I think that's something I do support. As to a DEI consultant, I do support that preliminarily, but one of the comments and portions of our staff report talked about establishing an Office of Equity at some point. And at some point, I don't think it meant like years from now, but somewhere down the road. And I think that's something we should aim for. And whether the consultant gets us there, we have a consultant preliminarily to help guide some of this. And then ultimately, I think, and it's a budgetary issue as well as a policy issue, that we go in that direction for a lot of the reasons stated by members of the public. But I think if you're going to prioritize this, let's prioritize it the way we prioritize other staffing. So that would be my thought on that. I do support a DEI commission. And I would like, if we do have one, my input would be that it deals with issues of hiring within the city. To me, one of the fastest ways to equity is through economics. And these jobs that we have at the city, I've said this before, they are good jobs. And so a little bit of oversight on that. I think the city is doing well and can always improve. And I think a little bit of oversight on that subject is important. We've talked about communicating with the school districts, plural, some of which might be interested in our communication, some of which may not, but nothing precludes the city from communicating its findings on commissions, from commissions, from consultants, from a future director of office equity. Because one of the things we got from many of the reports from the community related to what was going on in the schools, and we know that that is something that if we're going to deal with issues of diversity and inclusion and equity, we have to deal with the schools. I would like some coordination with the civilian police report, panel, oversight panel, perhaps an annual report type of presentation to the commission so that they have a sense of what's going on there. And then also deal with issues of housing discrimination within our community. So those are 4 items there. And in terms of the lottery, what was it? I did hear an interesting idea from Mr. Duffy about the pre-qualifying and then selection. And I, as a general rule, if I was going to be making the future decision, if that's still around, I'm leaning away from a lottery for this. But again, I do want to see how our healthy democracy process works. But there is a concern about politics in this, and it's obvious that it's out there. I mean, we're in politics, so it's going to be part of it. And so, perhaps having some kind of consideration there. I'd like to see that fleshed out quite a bit. I'm not quite sure how that works with precision, but it was an interesting idea. And then lastly, I'll make a comment on committees and commissions, which, we've added on quite a bit in the last 3 years, in terms of staff time to new commissions, new committees, and additional duties to some of these commissions and committees. And things do change and needs do change within a community. And we have to, as a council, we are repeatedly advised not to kill our staff. And so when that comes into a staff report, I think we have to take that seriously if we have a commission that is going to be effective. So I'm open to a lot of ideas. And as to the idea that someone on a committee is pitted against the DEI commission, I don't think the people on these committees and commissions are going to be thinking that way. And if they are, all I can say is don't let the door hit you on the way out. We'll leave it there, because I just don't think we need that kind of thinking on any of our committees or commissions. And quite frankly, I don't see it. So I don't think it's really pitting one group against another. I think it's really kind of reanalyzing what we have for committees and commissions, and honoring the fact that in order for those committees and commissions to be effective, our staff has to have the time to work with them and to work with us. I think that covers almost everything that was in the staff report for feedback. And if not, talk again. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Posake, followed by Council Member McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll reiterate my support for the staff recommendation of a hybrid auditor review system. I will say that I kind of like Mr. Duffy's recommendation about rather if we find too many folks that are qualified to do a lottery amongst them, I think there's merit to that. The thing I want to talk most about here, though, is this idea of a DEI consultant versus a commission, not scratch that, DEI consultant right now or very soon, versus a new hire as a DEI director, whether reporting to the city manager or to the council. But as I've been thinking about this tonight, I like to put something forward, which would be, we can hire a consultant for maybe a quarter of the cost, of a new hire as a director of equity or DEI. And I'm wondering if we can, write that request for proposal or whatever we're going to call it in such a way that we're looking for someone who has a history of being brutally honest with cities, number one, someone who can be given free rein of our city offices for a number of weeks or months, and someone who will then without pre-reporting to anyone else, deliver a report to the city manager, the city attorney, and the city council at the same time. I'm wondering if others might be prone to accept that as a way. I'm not convinced that might not even be a better way than hiring a new person to be a director of equity who reports directly to the council. That that person needs to fit in with the staff group as well. And I'm wondering if a consultant, the right one anyway, might be able to be more honest with us and with city staff. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. As I said, I'm in broad support of the staff proposal here. I do appreciate all the comments from the public, but Jim Duffy's suggestion for that path on lotteries, I like both halves of it, making sure we have qualified people in that pool, and maybe because of the political nature of it, making it blind and having it be a lottery there. Also further intrigued by the vice mayor's proposal that we get someone in with a critical eye, and sometimes come with a critical eye isn't your long-term solution. sometimes they're there to show you the mirror that you won't look into. And so I'd like to hear more about that. But and then from the public side, if we are the first one who put an ordinance like this for the hybrid model forward first, that's a good thing, and I'm okay with that. So let's keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to jump in here now, and I tend to agree. I actually really like the vice mayor's idea. My thought before he spoke was to think that we should hire a consultant, and part of that person's task would be to decide, do we actually need to have this to be an in-house thing, or what is another option? The idea of hiring someone right now, I think, would be premature, because I think I at least want to have more information, and I don't know how we get that without hiring somebody to get that information. And I don't want that person to be a permanent employee. I want them to be a consultant, and I like the idea that they have broad access and perhaps a limited period of time, and with the goal being a actionable suggestion or report to the city manager, the city attorney, and the city council. So I want to jump on that bandwagon along with Councilmember McDonald. I do like Mr. Duffy's recommendation, because I think people are very much underestimating how political this could be. And the last thing I think we want is to be hiring people who people feel have an axe to grind or stand on a certain position. I think we want people to be like the people who we have been putting on our committees, commissions, and ad hoc groups, just unbelievably dedicated Petaluma community volunteers who really want to work on this issue. And I think the idea of just a random lottery is not where I want to go either. So I'm just going to weigh in on that as well. And yeah, I think that's, I do support the staff's recommendations about how we're going to go forward. And the whole thing with the schools, this is a perfect example of the political nature of this. Yes, we do realize how important reaching out to the school members is, and the school boards, but we have no ability to make them work. But that would be one of the things that I would like to see this consultant actually tackle, how we could make that happen in a better way. So with that, I'm going to call on our city attorney and go forward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to respond to a few of the structural things that are being discussed, and with some info that's hopefully helpful. The easiest item is that it's really not, we have the city manager form of government by our charter. And under that system, we had a slide that mentioned this. There's only 3 direct reports to the council, and everybody else reports to the chief executive, who's the city manager. There are different ways we can retain contractors. A lot of that work, far and away the majority of it happens at the city manager level. Some of it, though, goes to the council for approval, like for award of contracts, including some individual consultants. So there's some options there, but just in terms of reporting, there's really not an option to short of a charter amendment to create something that's akin to what's called the city administrator form of government, where there are additional direct reports to the council. So that's one item I wanted to mention. Another is that in terms of, well, I guess it's a few things briefly. So one is a DEI body, I think, and it's been talked about a little bit in terms of looking at how that body would be constructed, looking at how the other subordinate bodies of the council have been constructed and the ongoing need for them and opportunities for consolidation, et cetera, for bandwidth and also just effectiveness reasons. That I think that's something that is implicit in the staff recommendation to look at that, to allow adequate support for such an important body. And I think part of that consideration is what it would be doing. And I think that might go to sort of the makeup of it and the formation of it, because if it's, I think, and staff can add their comments, but in the hybrid that's been proposed by staff, that auditor person, that is a very critical role that requires a highly skilled person, a highly knowledgeable, highly qualified person. One of the things that, Councilmember Healy mentioned it, and is a benefit of that position and that structure, is that retention can provide for that person having full access to confidential information to be able to make determinations based on it that a public body wouldn't necessarily be able to. And similarly, one of the reasons why we included mention of a possible use of the healthy democracy type selection process is one of the benefits that has in the case of the fairgrounds visioning is it allows for a body not formed by the council and therefore not subject to the Brown Act except when it chooses to be. So it's able to have some confidential meetings to carry out its functions. And if the body that the council has in mind it would be desirable for them to have that ability, that method is a good one. And Mr. Duffy's suggestion is interesting because it would still allow, to the extent there is a role that the body needs to play that requires specialized expertise, that they could be pre-qualified for that while still not being chosen by the council. So I think those are some of the kind of considerations that we alluded to in talking about some of the choices before the council that ideally, as always they ideally are driven by the purpose that the council has in mind and the function that's intended, the role that's intended. So I'll stop there, but hopefully that's a little bit helpful in terms of some of those choices. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So in terms of working on a motion, Vice Mayor, maybe you want to speak before that?
Well, I'm happy to, if you were going to make the motion, yes.
No, I don't make the motions. I just try and get them out of you.
I had another comment come to mind regarding Council Member King's speaking about the relatively low cost at $25,000 a year. And I thought when I looked at that Palo Alto ordinance that it was unclear completely to me whether that was $75,000 over 3 years or $75,000 a year for 3 years. And certainly the rest of my research would lead me to believe is more likely $75,000 a year. But that's all I have to add to that. And I'd be happy to hear if any of the staff have a better answer to those numbers. Well, I'm not quite ready to make it. Well, if I was going to make a motion now, I would move that we accept the staff's recommendations with the I'm good enough. I trust our staff to be able to request the right kind of consultant, even if the consultant goes through them as an intermediary. And I'd like to recommend we take the staff's recommendations and do something like add to the request for proposal from a consultant that we're looking for someone who's brutally honest, and leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we do have a motion on the floor. So go to Councilmember Healy.
Thank you. So it wasn't clear to me that we needed a motion on this item. I think we were just to provide direction to staff, and I was wondering if staff feels we've provided adequate direction at this point.
You have. It's always nice to have that clarity in a motion, but you have provided.
I'm just worried that we're going to get hung up on details if we try to go further at this point.
And I'm actually very flexible, but if staff feels that they have enough information, I'd like to get a reiteration of what they feel they are going forward with, so that we can at least take a straw poll or two if there's something else that we didn't hear. But did you have anything more to say, Councilmember Healy?
No.
No, okay. So Councilmember Barnacle followed by Councilmember King.
Yeah, so appreciate not having a motion here, but I would just like to hear where we actually landed, because I think I've lost count a little bit. Councilmember King, I completely agree that if people feel like they're being pitted against each other, what I've heard is they feel like they're competing for staff time and attention. And you know, if one group is focused on getting the senior center back open and another group is focused on, you know, getting a tree ordinance across the line, and who's got the council's attention, it ultimately comes to a zero-sum game at some point, and we've got to make the tough decisions. The one thing I'll say, I'm clearly outvoted on the in-house versus consultant. I would just, my guidance is to make sure that whatever we ask the consultant for, it's not a duplication of what the ad hoc committee just came up with, which a bunch of recommendations. It should be, you know, really about establishing a baseline and building on it. And I would like to have someone speak to how we're going to establish institutional relationships needed to implement whatever the action plan is, because that's what I don't feel like that part of my comment got addressed, and I'd really like to hear that. And other than that, I'll be silent for the rest of the night on this item.
Thank you. Councilmember King.
Thank you. My only comment was I don't know that the direction in the report was provide direction. I don't know that, you know, they have recommendations. It's kind of an unusual report in that regard, is that the recommendations are frequently at the top. So I'm not sure if the public is really expecting us to make a binding motion, but I think we clearly need to provide, you know, a summary of the direction that's been given, because it's been a lot. So that was really all I was going to say at the moment.
Thank you. So can I ask the Vice Mayor to withdraw your motion so that we can then hear what staff feels they have been directed to do, and then we can all weigh in again?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, so I will ask our city manager if she would like to try and synthesize what you believe you have been tasked with.
I will. Thank you. And thank you all for a really robust and thoughtful conversation. And I do want to make mention that the hiring of the consultant does not preclude us from at some point hiring an in-house or establishing a DEI commission. I think it's having somebody come in, and staff has been, like I said, we're not the experts. So we want somebody to be brutally honest. We want somebody to be able to show us where our weaknesses are, because we can't be successful as a city if we're not. So what I heard from council was support for the hybrid oversight model, which included going out for an independent police auditor, was hiring a DEI consultant that would be brutally honest, that could help us outline a map to establish and strengthen our institutional relationships. So it's not just a city focused racial equity plan, but that it's supported by our partnership with the schools. And it's going to be essential that the schools are involved in probably the selection of this consultant, but also in the interviews and some of the work that we're doing together. we've got, we talk about selection of the advisory committee and I will be talking to Mr. Duffy a little bit more about his idea about the pre-qualified selection panel. We had initially suggested the lottery because of wanting to make sure it's diverse and that it is politically, it's a politically free zone. And also, if our panel for the fairgrounds works really well, that it is representative of our demographics, and that we are kind of righting the ship as far as making sure it's a panel that is not only representative of our community, but that they are compensated for their time. So that would be something that we may want to consider. But we would bring all of this back to council. And so I'd like to recommend that we spec out a scope for both the DEI consultant and the independent police auditor and bring it back to council for feedback, if that is the pleasure of the council.
Okay, I'll just weigh in first. I think that's a very good synthesis of where I'm standing on this. So thank you. The vice mayor has his hand up, followed by Councilmember Barnacle.
Thank you, Mayor. I really would like to bring this back to a motion. I feel like many people in our town who've sat through the AHCAC meetings and heard what we're going to discuss tonight are really wanting to hear us vote in favor of, at the very least, the civilian oversight model that's been proposed. And so even if we put off the rest for, with direction and more research, I'd like to make a motion that we, at the very least, accept the civilian oversight model proposed tonight, if that's not too far off base.
And that would be the hybrid model as staff has submitted.
Yes.
Okay, so that is a motion on the floor. So thank you. Okay, Councilmember Barnacle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll start by seconding his motion. And then my question, I guess I lied in my last comment, is it feels like there's a sense from the council that that hiring the DEI consultant is a priority, but it didn't make it to our top 10 priorities that were from that prior meeting. And it feels like at the very least, we should include this as a potential item to be prioritized with the others.
We certainly will. Yes, Councilmember Barnacle, we actually have been talking to staff because we do have the AHCAC recommendations on our list of priorities. However, that only took us to this meeting because we didn't know what the next steps were going to be that council was going to direct us on. So we will be bringing this back on May 2nd to be able to talk about timing, and because this definitely fleshes out what our next steps are. So it'll be really important for council to help us prioritize that.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
Thank you. Councilmember King.
Yes, I just have one question. There was no reference to the DEI commission. Is that something we're going to look to down the road, given the recommendation about staff time?
Yes, Councilmember King, I think I mentioned it as that hiring the consultant wouldn't preclude us from looking. I mean, I'd like to hear what the consultant comes up with and how we can achieve that. And it could be through the DEI commission. It could be through hiring Office of Equity and Diversity. It could be via many, many different efforts and initiatives. So that definitely is not off the plate. I just think that we need to, we probably will have a priority at our goals and priority workshop to talk about how to best support our current committees and commissions. And I think we've got some good feedback this evening, so we'll probably come back with a recommendation on that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So what I heard was that we are supporting an independent police. We're recommending for staff to the independent police auditor, a DEI consultant who will be tasked with being brutally honest, map the establishment of institutional relationships, get schools involved, determine whether or not we need a DEI commission, and whether we need a position in-house on DEI. And that we actually have a motion in front of us by the vice mayor, seconded by Barnacle, that we are supporting the staff's recommendation for the hybrid civilian oversight model. I would also like to add, just as a recommendation, that part of the request for proposal for this consultant should be to be reading and understanding the report that the ad hoc community advisory committee gave us, because that is a pretty clear report, including the videos that go with it. So okay, so if anybody has anything else to add, this is your time, and otherwise we're going to vote on the motion by Posake, seconded by Barnacle. And not seeing any hands up, I will ask our city clerk to take a roll call vote.
Mayor Barrett?
Yes.
Council members Barnacle?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Healy?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
Posake?
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
Okay, thank you, and thank everybody for all the work we're doing here. And this is another step down the road. So thank you. It's going to take a lot of steps, but we're going to get there. So now we are moving on to unfinished business. And this is adoption, second reading of ordinance number 2810 NCS, approving an amended and restated lease agreement with Rooster Run Golf Club LLC. And I am going to call on our Assistant City Manager, Brian Cochran.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, council members. The item before you is the second reading of the ordinance approving the amended and restated lease agreement with Rooster Run. I won't belabor the specifics as we discussed those in great detail 2 weeks ago. I did want to highlight, though, that in addition to the ordinance and the agreement as proposed by staff at the March 21st meeting, the council did request one amendment to that, and we have incorporated that into the agreement, which was the addition of requiring adherence to the integrated pest management plan of the city for the maintenance of the golf course. And so we have included language in the agreement to reflect that, and that is now before you for the second reading to approve that agreement tonight. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And I'm seeing Councilmember Healy's hand up.
Thank you. So I noticed that Exhibit F for the recycled water agreement is still a placeholder. It's blank. Can staff address that?
Exhibit F should be the recycled water agreement exactly as presented with the March 21st agenda. So that is the full agreement that would be incorporated in and agreed to by Rooster Run. So it's not a placeholder.
What was posted on for the staff report was still a blank. So am I missing something here?
Let's see, I'm trying to pull it up while we're talking here. There should have been an Exhibit F that was the full recycled water agreement.
It was on our packet 2 weeks ago, but Councilmember Healy is asking about it for this one.
Right. So I'm looking at the attachment, and I don't know if Karen Gonzalez, if you've got any insight into that.
No, I'll have to check. I thought I posted the correct one that after I entered
Okay.
exhibits A through D, but if not, I can get that to the council.
Yeah, and it will be identical to the March 21st Exhibit F that was posted with that agenda. So we can incorporate that into the final documents that will be signed by both the city as well as.
And can you remind us substantively what that says?
Yeah, so basically it would be a more modernized version of our standard recycled water agreement that gives the city certain curtailment rights under certain drought conditions. It also would put the price of recycled water at 4% of the potable rate, which is about currently under the current rates about $83 per acre foot of recycled water that's used by Rooster Run. There are a variety of provisions in that agreement in terms of how much water the course needs to take, how much the city potentially can send them, and some different trigger points if they go above their 325 acre foot allotment in the peak season. And
Okay,
Eric,
thank you.
I don't know if you, oh, okay, thank you.
That's good.
Okay, so that's the only question or comment I'm seeing from the council members. So I will ask our city clerk if she has received any public comment on this item.
Madam Mayor, no public comments were received on this item.
Thank you. So I will ask our moderator to see if there's anyone in the public who would like to speak during public comment on this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand in Zoom and you'll be called on in turn. You'll have 3 minutes in which to give your comments. We currently have one hand raised, two hands raised. First speaker is S. Kirks, followed by a recusant. Susan, you may unmute and begin your comments.
I reviewed the amended lease before you this evening, and I happened to notice that the reference to Audubon International was still in the maintenance segment. I wanted to again recommend that not remain in the agreement. This organization has really taken advantage of the Audubon name, and as the mayor mentioned in the last time you reviewed the this agreement, the first time, the National Audubon Organization sued the Audubon International Organization and unfortunately was not successful in requiring that they not co-opt the name of Audubon and attach it to their organization and then develop these bronze, silver, and gold standards so golf courses could pay to meet the certification standards and have this name, including describing golf courses as sanctuaries. If you just Google the group, you'll find at least one online article about how a certified golf course kills birds that are in the way of the golfers. It's just really not a good standard to include in any type of agreement, really. And since we have a very excellent Audubon organization here in Sonoma County with many Petaluma members and a total membership of over 3,000 members, for the actual Audubon standard, very important conservation work that's done, and many contributions to Petaluma, including securing the Ramsar wetland of international importance for the community of Petaluma. It's a little bit like a slap in the face to the actual Audubon organization. And so I would just respectfully request that you re-examine that. And there's really no reason to have a requirement that Rooster Run, somehow comply with the standards of Audubon International. It really is, it's just not a positive look, and it's not a positive action. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Our next speaker is Recusant, followed by Richard Coombs. Recusant, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you, Patrick. More of a question of nescience here, because I'm not familiar with this process, but we're talking about the city leasing or renewing leases on city-owned property. Is there some kind of maybe civic standard or maybe Petaluma standard model? Maybe it's a fiscal model and or a natural resources model in determining, you know, hey, if we're going to renew this lease, what is the cost of city services? Obviously, specifically water. I think Councilmember Healy was referencing an appendix that was supposed to have a water report. I know that's keen on everyone's mind, and you think of golf course, obviously water kind of enters that conversation pretty quickly. So I just wondered if there is some kind of objective standard that gets looked at when thinking, okay, how is this using city fiscal and natural resources versus, you know, what it's providing? And I know sometimes in that kind of model, you might think, oh, how much maybe tax is generated. I don't love that as the only measure of what something can bring to a city or a town. Just curious if any review like that happens when we talk about the city leasing property, especially such a kind of a significant piece of property as a golf course. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Our next speaker is Richard Coombs. Richard, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Yes, thank you. I had noted myself that the Audubon reference was still in there. And again, as I stated originally, that was never anything that came from us. I have absolutely no problem deleting the reference to that now that we're agreeing to the pest management program. So if it's, as the speaker said, if that's in any way offending anyone, I have no problem deleting the reference to that entity. And then second, as to the second speaker, again, we've had obviously long discussions on all of this, and I continue to mention that it's wastewater that we're using for the golf course irrigation. And beyond that, I'm here for answering any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And that is the last hand raised, so I'll turn it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And with that, we'll close public comment, and Councilmember Healy has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just going to ask the city attorney if on the second reading we would be free to remove the reference to the Audubon standards.
Thanks for the question, Councilmember Healy. I'm just looking, we're not free to substantively change the ordinance without having to reintroduce it. So I'm just looking at that. I think we purposely included some flexibility in it. Yeah, so we did include flexibility in section 3 where it says that the city manager is authorized to execute on behalf of the city a lease agreement with Rooster Run that is substantially in accordance with that attached as Exhibit A and is approved as such by the city attorney. And there's authorization to prepare and execute supplementary agreements as needed. So if the council prefers to have that final change be included in the final execution documents, I believe we have that flexibility without amending the ordinance, and which would require reintroduction.
Okay, well, I'd be prepared to make that motion. Thank you.
Is that are you making the motion?
With Mr. Danley's edits, yes, thank you.
Thank you. So there's a motion by Healy, and I'm calling on Councilmember Barnacle.
Second.
And a second by Barnacle. So with that, we will have a roll call vote.
Mayor Barrett?
No.
Council members Barnacle?
Yes.
Fisher?
No.
Healy?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
Hoseke?
Yes.
Motion passed 5-2. Mayor Barrett and Councilmember Fisher's voting no.
Thank you very much. And now we are on to general public comment. So we will see it. Can I, has the city clerk received any general public comments?
Madam Mayor, the city received 2 public comments that were posted online.
Thank you very much. And so I'll ask our moderator to see if there's anybody in the Zoom audience who would like to speak on items that are not on today's agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sharing my screen so we can see the 30-second timer, which I will start. Members of the public wishing to speak on items that are not on the current agenda, please raise your hand in Zoom, and we will figure out how many minutes we allocate based on that number of hands raised. So general public comment is for items that are not on the current agenda and not under action by the council at this time. So if you wish to speak on those, please raise your hand in Zoom. Attendees will be muted when their time expires and when their comments have concluded, whichever is coming. Speakers are encouraged to be respectful. Threats of violence and obscenity are grounds for removal from this meeting. And if you're unable to speak during the time allotted, please send your comments to cityclerk@cityofpetaluma.org. We have 2 hands raised, and that's S. Kirks and Rakusen. So I will reset our timer to 3 minutes. And call on Susan to give her comments.
In your last meeting that went later than tonight, Josh Simmons made a very direct, clear appeal to you or comment that including general public comment at the end of your meeting, as he described it, is brutal. For a meeting that went that late, definitely that was certainly true. But in general, it's not a good practice to put general public comment on items that are not agendized at the end of your meetings. And I would like to request that you reconsider that, whomever is setting the agenda and making the decision to do that, and move general public comment to the location where traditionally it usually is, which is at the beginning of your meetings. If there are families, if there are individuals who have jobs the next day, other responsibilities, but who have something very important they would like to share in a public meeting, it is in the public interest to have general public comment at the beginning of your meetings. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. The next speaker is Rakusen. You may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you, Patrick. Just going to reiterate that I would love to see the council advise the Technology Advisory Committee to put together some kind of case study, ideally some kind of cost analysis on what it would take for the city of Petaluma to directly install broadband service for internet for delivery to homes and businesses. I've said on public meetings many times, as many people have, not a fan of relying on cellular technology, specifically 5G technology, for delivery of last mile service for internet for broadband service. And there's some great examples. I know County of Sonoma has been brought up as a model. Also, Sea Ranch, California, a town a lot of us know and love, did that work as well, taking out, in their case, they took out loans to install broadband infrastructure that they then created their own internet service, also rent back to other internet providers. And I think it could be a very interesting prospect for the city of Petaluma, especially after reviewing some of the Technology Advisory Committee's presentations and how really the private sector companies doing the installation of infrastructure was not resulting in kind of superior infrastructure. And if anything, it's kind of leaving the city in the dark a little bit. So just wanted to reiterate that. Also, any updates on the city wireless ordinance, any changes that are being made there. And then finally, I mentioned before about sewer laterals. I guess this is a little tongue-in-cheek, but if the Public Works has any schedule on when they're replacing any residential sewer laterals, point me in that direction before we splurge and replace ours. So thank you, and thank you to the council.
Thank you for those comments. And I should have mentioned at the beginning, I think we dropped a couple attendees, but we're 13 members of the public in the attendance at this time. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And with that, we close general public comment, and I'll bring it back to the council for council comments. Let's start with Councilmember McDonald.
I have no report this evening, no committee appointments met or otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Healy.
Thank you. So two things. The North Bay Division Executive Committee met last Friday. You should have received an email from Nancy Hall Bennett today announcing our next North Bay Division quarterly meeting on Wednesday, April 27th in Mare Island. That will be our first in-person quarterly division meeting in quite some time. It should be a good meeting, especially for new council members who've never gotten to network from our fellow electeds from the four North Bay counties. The speaker will be Assembly Member Tim Grayson from the eastern part of the North Bay Division. And the second thing that I wanted to mention, there will soon be an opening, a recruitment for a new second vice president of the North Bay Division. This is a rare occurrence. It only happens once every 4 years in terms of that being a position for Sonoma County, which it is this time. And it's a bit of an unfortunate timing in terms of us being in the process of transitioning to district elections, because being appointed second vice president of the division is really signing up for a 4-year gig, because the progression is second vice president, first vice president, president, and then immediate past president, which is a thing. So if there really has to be an expectation that the person who's applying for this and gets appointed intends to seek re-election so they can do the whole 4-year cycle. But if anyone's interested in that, you can reach out to me or talk to Nancy once that invite comes out. And then this morning, the Water Advisory Committee met. I believe the council received an update from our city manager on that. But the main topic was the WAC did approve unanimously the recommended 6.16% increase in wholesale rates for the next fiscal year for Sonoma County Water Agency. Interestingly, the Water Agency had initially been proposing 10% increase, but with the work of the TAC, which is basically our public works staff, they got arm wrestled down to 6% so that some to minimize the impact on rates, but some critical infrastructure work will continue to move forward. So the new wholesale rate is $1,062.04 per acre foot, as opposed to just about exactly $1,000 an acre foot the current fiscal year. But here's your fun with math factoid for the night. $1,062 per acre foot works out to slightly, or just about exactly 0.3 cents per gallon. So water's cheap and continues to be. And we continue to do much better than the rest of the Bay Area in this area. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. And a timely reminder about water, saving water. So thank you.
Actually, if I could add,
sure.
Just very briefly, since you mentioned that, Madam Mayor, Lake Sonoma right now is slightly below where it was this time last year. So absent some miraculous late spring storms, we're going to be in the same situation we were last year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Barnacle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Healy, for causing me to lose my stomach there at the end of the night. That's those are alarming numbers. Holy smokes! I have a couple of things to report out on. The North Bay Water Reuse Authority met. We basically approved some budget for the consultants to go forward and getting us in position to go after some grants to expand our purple pipe. Excited about the relief project in Wiseman. I was asked to read an announcement about Butter and Eggs Day Parade from Marie McCusker, so I'll just do that. So Butter and Eggs Day Parade, the festival is 10 to 5. There's a kids parade at 11:30. The main parade starts at noon. Petaluma Transit is providing free buses. You can ride your bike, and there's free, safe bike corral on B Street between 4th and 5th by the museum. Councilmember McDonald, I know you've been championing that, so thank you. If you bring your own water bottle, you can fill it up at the free water stations. So I encourage everybody to do that. Be there, be seen, and be safe. Wear your mask if you're, especially if you haven't been vaccinated or you're immune compromised. And then after the Butter and Eggs Day Parade, we have our Spring Antique Fair from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. At 4th and Kentucky up to Western, or 4th on Kentucky between 4th and Western. So with that, I have one question: is why is general public comment moving to the end of the meeting? It just feels like it's becoming more common, and it doesn't need to be. And I generally agree it should be at the front. So I would just like to have that question answered.
Thank you. Councilmember King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have no liaison report since our last meeting. It is good to hear about events out in the public, though, after several years of not hearing about those events. I think not only does it warm our hearts, but I think everybody else's as well. And I hope and expect a big turnout for the parade this month. But I do have one comment, and I know we made reference to this earlier in the meeting, but I did want to comment on the passing of former Mayor Clark Thompson and thank him for his service to the city, both as a mayor and also as a planning commissioner. He was a really good guy. I got to know him over the years just by being, in town, really more than through anything else. So rest in peace, Clark. You'll be missed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you. I too have not had any liaison assignments since our last meeting. But I did want to report out that, as many of you know, I started this First Friday at 5 bike ride last June to invite the public to come along and tour our city. And so it meets every first Friday at 5 at Walnut Park. And I'm happy to report that last Friday we had 35 people come join us for an hour-and-a-half bike ride, and want to thank Council Members Barnacle and Posake for joining us. So it was a good time. And I think we'll start seeing even more and more people join us. And so it's great to take over the streets and see the cars wave at us. Thanks.
Thank you. And Vice Mayor Posake.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a continuum of care board meeting. Couple of things about it. We elected a new chair, who was Tom Schwedhelm, council member from City of Santa Rosa. And we also, I think for the first time ever, according to reports, received a list of all the funding streams and a funding calendar for, all homelessness for the next year. And so, yeah, perhaps Councilmember McDonald had something with getting that done. And then lastly, we had some spirited discussion of a more ongoing competition evaluation committee, a committee that would both assess the effectiveness of different programs around the county before giving them more money the next year, as well as compare those ideas of effectiveness to the possibilities of new programs, and really try to make more use of data in deciding where the money goes. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. So I had 2 meetings since our last meeting, and one was the Mayors and Council Members Ad Hoc Group, which is discussing the restructuring of that body so that it'll be more effective within our county. And the report out on that will be at our first in-person meeting in over 2 years, which is Thursday, the 14th in Rohnert Park. And I really would recommend those council members who haven't attended and none of us has attended in a couple of years, to please try and attend, because it is a really good forum for finding out what is going on in the county and other jurisdictions, and also for just networking with other council members. So I hope we will do that. And if you are going to do that, let me know and we can carpool. So the other meeting I had was with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District's Mobile Source and Climate Change Committee, of which I am the chair. And we just passed on a recommendation to the board for updates to CEQA thresholds of significance for climate impacts, and the associated justifications report for those impacts. This is the first significant update in over a decade. So it's really a big strengthening of CEQA and bringing it up to date with all our adopted climate emergencies and goals. So this is something I'm very happy that we were able to get done, and I expect it to be adopted by the full board in the next couple months. So with that, I will turn this over to our city manager for her report and ask her to please respond to Councilmember Barnacle's concern about the general public comments.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Barnacle. We actually had moved the general public comment to the end of the agenda when we were going through the districting process, and tonight was the last to accommodate for the districting process because we don't really have time certain on our agenda. So we wanted to make sure that that districting item would always be up front before every other business item. And general public comment became the last item because it moved everything else on the agenda. So we will be going back to the general public comment at the beginning of the meetings moving forward. And a couple announcements. If folks have received an invitation to participate on the panel for the fairgrounds visioning process, they have until tomorrow to send it in. We really want to encourage folks to send that in. So right now, I'm trying to remember the number, but we're getting pretty close to a pretty big percentage returned. So probably higher than they've seen in previous engagements, but we're not surprised about that because we're Petaluma. We also have, we've been busy, Public Works staff has been busy moving two demonstration active transportation projects forward this week. They'll be installing a temporary mini traffic circle demonstration at the intersection of Bassett and Upham. And this demonstration project will provide an opportunity for the community to experience this traffic calming project and share their thoughts about it. So look for signage with QR codes to link to our website and take a survey. And staff had also met with residents who live on Rainier Avenue to get their feedback to get a proposed realignment of Rainier to calm traffic and create safer paths to travel for cyclists and pedestrians. And we're working to kick off that demonstration project on Rainier to get more community feedback about a new way to align Rainier. And that does it for me, and really appreciate the conversation tonight. Staff is really excited about our next steps on racial equity in Petaluma. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And this is the end of a very productive meeting. And again, I'm always thanking everybody because you all do such a good job. And we're going to adjourn today's meeting in memory of our former mayor, Clark Thompson. So good evening, everybody.